Joe Biden's alive. Yeah, he was seen getting out of a car and boarding a plane. So he is alive. And I kind of have that normalcy bias. Like I expected it. But considering we've been through, I guess, like a couple dozen unprecedented historical moments, I thought it was possible that he just never shows up again. He didn't really speak, though. So, it is what it is. We'll talk about that. Kamala Harris has secured the nomination, at least in essence, calling herself the presumptive nominee. She's got enough delegates pledged to support her. She's winning the prediction markets, but she may not get access to Joe Biden's funds because I believe Trump's campaign, Republicans and Democrats are arguing you cannot transfer funding from Joe Biden's donations to her. So all the Biden HQ donations might get refunded to their donors, which could be big. And then, of course, we've got the big funny story. Black Lives Matter slams the DNC for installing Kamala Harris. And why this is oh so funny is that Joy Reid is basically saying, if you don't vote for Kamala Harris, you ain't black. She didn't say it literally like that, but that's basically what she's saying. So we'll talk about that. Plus, we're going to talk about the lawsuit against New York for interfering in the election. The Supreme Court has ordered them to answer. And we've got the AG actually here with us. So before we get started, my friends, head over to castbrew.com to buy coffee. Delicious Cast Brew coffee. When you buy Cast Brew, you're supporting our show. With Ian here, I got to say, Ian's Graphene Dream is quickly becoming one of the more popular blends that we have.
Good. Have you had it?
I haven't had it, but we're getting incredible feedback. People love the low acidity coffee. Appalachian Nights, of course, is everybody's favorite. So if you want to support the show, you can buy our coffee over at castbrew.com, but also head over to timcast.com, click join us, become a member to support our work directly. And you'll get access to the members-only uncensored show coming up at 10 p.m. where you as members get to call in to talk to us and our guests, join the show. And as a member, you're making all of this possible. We can't do this without you guys as members. You basically fuel the whole operation. So if you think the show is good and you want it to keep going, timcast.com, click join us, become a member. But also don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with all of your friends. Joining us tonight to talk about this and everything else is Attorney General Andrew Bailey.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Do you want to just give a quick introduction to, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, man, I'm the Attorney General for the state of Missouri. And so I represent the state and the people of the state. We're the law firm for the state of Missouri. And we've done a lot of work since I've been in office, not only protecting Missouri consumers against fraudulent business practices and prosecuting criminals. We removed the Soros-backed prosecutor in the city of St. Louis who was refusing to do her job. It's the first time a state attorney general has taken legal action against a Soros-backed prosecutor. We've increased criminal prosecution statewide by 133%. So real tangible results. We're from the Show Me State, results matter. And we've taken on the Biden administration. I mean, more than 50 lawsuits against the Biden administration and the federal overreach that we see coming out of Washington, D.C. right now. There's no sanction in the United States Constitution for an unelected fourth branch of government. And so using lawsuits to assert state sovereignty and push back against that federal overreach when you've got that alphabet soup of bureaucratic agencies infringing on our rights, it's really critical to the work we do. One of the most important lawsuits I filed is our lawsuit against the state of New York to stop
I'm a big fan.
Rogue prosecutor and collusive judiciary from hijacking our national election. I'll tell you, this lawfare against President Trump is poisoning our democratic process. We're using every tool at our disposal to fight back.
Right on. Thanks for hanging out. We got Ian hanging out.
Yeah, geez. Speaking of poisoning, I wonder if Biden was poisoned. We'll talk about that on the show tonight. It just crossed my mind last night that maybe he was. I don't know. But shout out to Cast Brew. I love the Graphene Dream. I got to always remind myself it's not low caffeine, it's just low acid. So I'm still getting wired when I drink that stuff, but I had some about 5:30.
You can't have extra.
Have you had it yet?
No, I haven't. I really want to try it because I had never heard of low acidity coffee, but it seems like it makes sense. People would probably love it for digestion, enamel, things like that.
Less inflammation.
Yeah.
It's great, but you still got to watch that caffeine intake. Love you. Get it at castbrew.com.
I'm Hannah Claire Brimble. I'm a writer for SCNR.com, the Scanner News. Check out all their work at Timcast News when we get started.
Here we go. We got the first story from SCNR.com. BLM, Black Lives Matter, pans DNC as party of hypocrites for installing VP Harris as Democratic nominee. We do not live in a dictatorship. Delegates are not oligarchs. I have tremendous respect for whoever took over that Twitter account, that X account, and is calling out the DNC for doing exactly what we've been calling him out for. We have this thread from Black Lives Matter on X, verified account. How many followers they got? 1 million followers. Sunday, Joe Biden drops out. Kamala announces campaign with Biden endorsement. Kamala says she's going to work hard to earn the nomination. Kamala makes calls to party delegates Monday. Kamala Harris continues making calls to party delegates. Kamala Harris makes 2 public speeches. The Associated Press announces Kamala Harris has secured enough delegates to be the nominee by Monday night. Kamala releases a statement noting she has worked hard to go out and earn this nomination as promised. A 24-hour process of talking to party bosses is not democratic, nor is it a process Democrats should be proud of. We do not live in a dictatorship. Delegates are not oligarchs. Installing Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee and an unknown vice president without any public voting process would make the modern Democratic Party a party of hypocrites. We call on the DNC to create a process that allows for public participation in the nomination process, not just a nomination by party delegates. Hear, hear, Black Lives Matter. And I want to say this. We were just at the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and it was a whole lot of fun. Had a cheeseburger with a gluten-free bun. How about that? And many people asked if we're going to be at the Democratic National Convention, to which I said absolutely not, because I've grown quite fond of living. I do not want to go to the DNC where it's going to be violent and chaotic. Several people asked me, why would the DNC be more chaotic than the RNC? Wouldn't the left protest the right? Absolutely not. There were some protesters. They stood outside, they waved little flags, and they complained, and they said Donald Trump should be in prison. And we said, okay. And that was it. The DNC is the door for the far left extremists. The far left protesting the RNC is basically them trying to scale the Great Wall and to break their way in. That's an absurdity. The Democratic Party, however, is a door guarded by a few party elites that they feel they can break down. Now that Kamala Harris is trying to play the I just get to be the nominee game, and the progressive far left wing, especially with that protest we saw in D.C. of the anti-Israel groups taking over, these people are not going to accept this. So it's going to be a brokered convention. And just like in 1968, it will be a brokered convention. And they also expect it is going to be bedlam outside.
What's a brokered convention?
There's no stated so normally in a primary process, everybody votes. The delegates from the area where the vote takes place are pledged to support the person people voted for, kind of like the Electoral College. So you've got like 5 delegates in one area, and they say everybody votes for Joe Biden. Those delegates are loyal to Biden. They show up at the convention, and they cast their vote. A brokered convention, they can do whatever they want. There's no nominee. So Kamala Harris calls up all these delegates and says, you're going to vote for me? And they said, you got it. And she publicly announces, I've got the nomination. So the far left is not going to have it.
Right. It deters anyone else from challenging her. It was amazing to me how quickly everyone sort of got in line behind Kamala Harris, who, let's remember, was a farther left option who did not make it very far when she ran her own presidential campaign. But it's like of the 47 Democrats in the Senate, 45 had already thrown out endorsements for her. One of the only ones who hadn't, well, one was Bob Menendez, who's, going to resign has resigned, and he was found guilty. So he's kind of in an outward position anyways. But then also it's John Tester from Montana, who probably can't come out and endorse Harris because he's in a state that is likely going to get flipped. I mean, there's a very serious belief that will become a Republican seat. And then in the House, it's like, I think in total I have 192 people have already endorsed, of like 212 have endorsed Harris. I mean, they just fell in line so quickly, including Chuck Schumer, who waited 48 hours and then said, now that the process has played out, we're going to endorse Harris, which is like, what process?
Dude, and you see when he clapped for himself and nobody clapped?
Yeah, it was really...
like Kamala won, and then no one clapped.
It's like, oh, okay, I'm clapping.
On my drive over here, I was like, okay, this is the party that's been screaming about protecting democracy. We have to stop the threat to democracy. Then a candidate gets installed. And I see people posting about how grateful they are that a candidate got installed, threatening the democratic process for the people that are afraid of the threat to democracy.
There were complaints in 2016 when Hillary Clinton, it seemed like the process was rigged in 2016. And so then to be reliving that.
Seemed like.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly was rigged in 2016. And yeah, I mean, this is even worse. I mean, at least that played out over a primary season. And here it's like this bait and switch where there have been primaries and caucuses for Biden. And then, like you said, overnight, turn of a switch. I think it is.
I think it was the plan.
Yeah, I mean.
Because you look at 2016, we know that there were a series of, let's just call them awkward moments. And I'll clarify this too, rigged. Of course, the far left and the media is going to attack that by making the claim that we're saying Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton went behind closed doors and shifted votes. No. The media was colluding. The party officials were working to the greatest extent imaginable to block Bernie Sanders. We know that like Hillary Clinton was given the questions in advance by, I think it was Donna Brazile. I could be wrong. It's been a long time.
Donna Brazile.
Yeah. And then you had the WikiLeaks emails that got WikiLeaks released the emails. And we saw great party collusion to block Bernie Sanders, the popular Democratic choice. Once again in 2020, all these candidates unite against Bernie Sanders, endorse Joe Biden to shift all those votes. And I think the reason they did this structure, keeping Joe Biden as long as possible, was to block any other grassroots contender. Because let's be real, RFK Jr. would be the Democratic nominee were it not for this game they played. Kamala Harris could not get a single, get a single delegate? Not one. She drops out in disgrace. And now she's the nominee? By what metric should she be the nominee? Black Lives Matter, bravo for calling her out. But I'll say it, Chicago is going to be, let's just pray for our friends and families in Chicago.
I've been praying for Donald Trump, to be honest, for his safety and his health, because if something were to happen to him, I'm like wargaming in my mind, who would become the Republican nominee? Would it be Vivek? Would it be J.D. Vance at this point? Would it be Nikki Haley? And then she's more salvageable than Kamala, and then we get Nikki Haley and Pompeo as the president VP, and then they take us into war with Iran. Like,
real quick, what do you mean salvageable? Do you mean like she'll be worse than?
No, like more palatable, I guess is a better word.
I see. Okay,
Nikki Haley would be more palatable than this girl who got no delegates in her first attempt when she was her campaign was completely sunk in like a 3-minute diatribe by Tulsi Gabbard talking about her record in California, imprisoning, like keeping people in prison for slave labor.
Yep.
Arresting people. I don't know what
it was an amazing moment from Tulsi Gabbard when she was
really highly recommend watching that clip again. But I pray for
pull that
Trump's
clip
safety
up. We'll play it in a little bit.
And for a legitimate process right now.
Yeah, dripping with irony that the left continues to attack our democratic processes while screaming about being the sacred guardians of democracy.
Right now, you've got Donald Trump, who is chosen for the Republican Party by popular mandate. They held a primary process. Nikki Haley was involved. Vivek Ramaswamy was involved. You had Ron DeSantis. That was a real primary. In the early days of the primary, I remember when we were in Des Moines, Iowa, Vivek was legitimately like, I want to win. Nikki Haley is running. We were hoping Vivek would beat Nikki Haley, but we still wanted Trump to win. And the people voted and said, we want Donald Trump. And there you go. Vivek bows out and has now taken an amazing role. I don't know what his official role is. He's working with Trump or whatever, but he's been very active in Republican Party politics and speaking at many conventions.
And he's buying up BuzzFeed. I mean, he is really committed to what he said he was going to do, which is he wanted to change culture. I think that's commendable.
Even Nikki Haley has now endorsed Donald Trump. So they're all lining up saying, look, this is the people's choice. The Democrats are doing the opposite. And they're just like, you don't get to say. Your choice was Joe Biden because that's the only person we allowed. We ousted RFK Jr. Now Biden's leaving because he's infirm, and we're telling you it's Kamala. It is the Democratic Party, anti-democratic, calling the party with actual democratic voting processes fascists.
One of the there's like less than. I think there are 12 members of Congress, less than 20, that have not. They've released statements on Biden leaving, but they haven't endorsed Kamala Harris. And one of them is Rashida Tlaib, and she's like the Palestinian American elected official. And so I think there are actually more people who would have liked to see other options. And there is probably pressure coming internally, like fall in line, do what we say. Otherwise, we will potentially not support you in your race for re-election.
Yeah. AG, you're voting for Trump, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious about like the pressure in the party, because I know for a long time you have this split. You have Republicans who despise Donald Trump, but it seems like that's mostly shifted away as many members of the party at the higher level, like people who have been in elected office for a long time, have begun to accept that the people think he's the right choice.
Yeah.
Have you felt pressure from any groups to be like, like early on with DeSantis, we don't want Trump? Or has it been fairly easy to just say, look, I want to vote for Trump?
I mean, it's always been easy for me. I was the first statewide official to endorse President Trump, and it's because he leads a movement that puts Americans first and has led a movement that has expanded the Republican Party to places it wasn't going to go on its own, and no one else was going to get us there.
Look at this guy. Yep. You're voting for Trump, right?
I mean, the jury's out, man. I don't know if I'm going to vote.
He's going to vote for Trump.
But I'll tell you what, I support the democratic process above all.
I mean, it's just we're at this point where a middle-of-the-road person is just like, well, I don't want to choose Kamala, a Kamala cop who is appointed. Donald Trump, at least, there's a lot of people who are behind him, but no new wars. I mean, you can throw everything out the window, just say no new wars. Of course, they're going to call Trump a fascist. It's BS.
This whole this concept, this logic, it's illogical that you need to override the democratic process to protect against the threat to democracy is insanity. Truly the definition of insanity.
Yeah, I mean they are focused on they think that the ends justify the means, and that violates basic rule of law principles. It's antithetical to who we are as an American people, as a constitutional democratic republic.
How can people push back against this if they truly believe this is
I think taking action at the convention to the extent I think that's where people are going to sound off on this. And at the end of the day, the Democratic Party, like I said, you've had caucuses, you've had primaries. Those people have spoken, and now their voice is being stifled and silenced. This has never been about a process. It's always been about control. To your point,
I'm ready to join some of these protests. I literally don't want to join a leftist protest because they're going to burn things down and hurt innocent people. But I mean, in spirit. From the armchair level, I'm right there with, if Antifa shows up in Chicago to protest the Democratic Party, I support their peaceful endeavors, challenging the party and calling them out. The DNC is as corrupt as they come. It's been this bad since 2016. And what drives me crazy is, I was for Bernie 2015. I was like, Donald Trump seemed like to me, he seemed like it was a clown show. I was just like, I don't know what that is. It does not seem real or legitimate. It seems too jokey. Hillary Clinton she actively was promoting war with Russia. And now look where we are. And I'm just like, none of these people make any sense. And then comes Bernie Sanders, and he's just he wasn't worth a lot of money at the time. He was advocating for workers' rights. He had a lot in common with Donald Trump. Look, and I mean it. Go back to 2015 and look at the policies they shared. They both hated the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They were in favor of better trade deals for the American worker. Bernie Sanders said no open borders. In 2015, he said that's a Koch brothers proposal and he actually said, my God, if we open the borders, what would happen? They'd all flood this country. Not that I like Bernie now. He's certainly abandoned those principles and shifted completely in that direction. But ultimately, my point is, here we are now. At this point, I'm just like, the Democratic Party ousting him has proven there is no real process there for the people who want to see change. But there are, and what irks me is liberal pundits and personalities saying we approve and accept the party choosing for us. And because we approve it, that's democracy. You never got to vote. You never got to say. And that's why I'm totally out. And so when you mention, Attorney General, that Donald Trump has expanded the party, look at me and many of our guests. You've got libertarian, you got Mises Caucus people now who are saying they're going to be voting for Donald Trump because he has been a popular president.
I think there's huge groups of people, there are huge swaths of this country that feel left out. And Donald Trump has given them a voice. They still love this country. Kitchen table issues matter to them. Donald Trump's the only one talking about those issues. Kamala Harris isn't. And if you feel left out, you feel like you don't have a voice in the process, and you see something like what we've seen over the past 72 hours with Kamala Harris, that exacerbates that problem. And I think that's going to continue to push people back to Donald Trump and the Republican Party.
She said, we were watching Fox, and she's like, I'll put my record up against Trump's anytime. And I was like, what? What did you do? Like, if Joe Biden wants to make claims about his executive orders and the things he's done, like, okay, I guess. Biden has signed executive orders and has advocated. What did Kamala Harris do? She did nothing.
As the borders are, literally,
and she didn't go.
Much.
She didn't go.
There's that interview where they're like, have you been to the border? She says, we've been to the border. And he's like, no, you haven't. She's like, well, I've also never been to Europe. Why is that relevant?
Well, I mean, it's worse. She's like, they keep saying, we've never been to the border. We have been to the border. And he's like, but you haven't. And then she goes, and I haven't been to Europe either.
Yeah, it's just it's nonsensical. The thing about Kamala Harris's campaign that I find fascinating is, and maybe you can unpack this for us, but they're starting to say, well, she was this tough prosecutor, and therefore she can prosecute Donald Trump because he's done all these horrible things, apparently. But she also has to be in the position where she defends the Biden-Harris administration. Remember, they never let us forget that she was there even when they had shuffled her sort of to the personnel background. And so she's trying to run on her legacy as a prosecutor, which I have always heard right and left gets very mixed reviews, and also decide if she's going to stand by Joe Biden and say, I'm finishing the job he started, or if she's going to kind of attack this guy who has now just recommended her. The calculations there must be crazy. Do you think the American public would respond to her as a tough prosecutor?
No, I think she's going to own the failed policies of the Biden administration. People are looking around, and again, it's almost back to school time, and working families are like, how am I going to afford a new backpack and school lunches for my kids? Like, that stuff matters to people. And, the the border crisis. I mean, in Missouri alone, we've had 1,100 reported incidences of human trafficking in 1 year, more than 1,500 deaths from fentanyl exposure in 1 year, 43 innocent children who died from fentanyl exposure in 1 year. Those are real harms. So, like, Biden's failures to secure our national sovereignty and his hanging an open sign at the southern border are making Missouri communities less safe. Every state's a border state. I mean, these things, again, they matter to everyday working Americans, and Kamala Harris is going to have to own those things.
While we got you here, I got a question for you that you may be able to actually answer. And I think there was an official statement from Missouri. I don't know if it came from you or what office, but you're familiar with the Help America Vote verification story?
Yeah.
So this is, I've chosen February 17th, 2024 specifically as it is very large and terrifying numbers. Just some quick context for people to understand. Help America Vote verification is a system so that if someone is trying to register to vote, but they do not have an ID, the DMV, the MVA can submit the name, their birthday, and the last four of their social to the Social Security Administration to check to see if they are in the Social Security database. That way the person can be registered to vote. There have been a lot of concerns as many states, particularly important states for the election, like Arizona, are seeing tens of thousands of registration attempts every week, in some instances bi-weekly. In some instances, and the example that we have here from February 17th of this year, the state of Missouri had 78,421 verification requests, with 23,253 coming back as deceased. I believe the official statement was that this is voter roll cleanup. I don't know if you can shed some light on what's going on.
Yeah, that's a process the Secretary of State's office manages to help the county clerks clean up their voter rolls to make sure that the deceased or folks are purged from those rolls. And so that's an important part of the process. But when you see numbers like that, especially in swing states, like Missouri, bright red state, but Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin,
Texas is alarming.
Texas, yeah,
220,000.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. I mean, you think about the 10 million people who have crossed our border illegally and are here illegally, and it is illegal for them to participate in a national election. Certainly in Missouri, it's a felony offense. You have the forms you have to fill out if you're fraudulently holding yourself out as a legal resident. You're not. That's a felony forgery. And so, these other states need to look at those same laws and make sure that you're not only purging the deceased, but
hijacking
preventing of the election process by people who have no legal right to vote.
But is this confirmed, or I don't know if you don't know 100%, but this is Missouri doing voter roll cleanup?
I would need to confirm with our Secretary of State's office on the specific numbers, but I know that is an ongoing process that the Secretary of State manages.
It's super disturbing because it's like a third of the 70. It's the second most state of all of them. It's Texas, then Missouri, I think, is number 2, maybe.
Yeah, Texas. But this is, again, February 17th. It's one specific
and it's
week.
A third of them were deceased. It's not just like all the other states, you'd get like 72, New Jersey, 72 of them out of 2,800. So that's like 0.1%. 33% of them in Missouri. Like, what is going on that they're using Missouri? It looks like it's being used to funnel some sort of operation to get people on
this
voter
was
rolls.
Registering dead people. And so here's the problem. Texas denied everything because when this story first broke, I think it was back in March, Texas only reports every other week 219,323 registration verification requests, 4,559 came back matched but deceased. 36,000 came back with no match. Okay, so hold on. We got ourselves here a big old problem. Let's operate under the assumption this is still voter roll cleanup. If Missouri is doing voter roll cleanup to the tune of, in 1 week, 78,421 people, how were there 5,938 of those people that did not have a match in the Social Security database? How were 23,000? So if we want to say this is voter roll cleanup, 23,000 deceased makes a lot of sense. It violates the rules of the Help America Vote Act, which states this is specifically for registering people to vote, not for it offers no provision for using it for voter roll cleanup, but it still might be the case. Then how do you have 6,000 of the people not actually matching? That would mean that Missouri caught in 1 week 6,000 people on their voter rolls who aren't in the Social Security Administration database. And I will stress, you don't get erased from that database. They do not reuse numbers. Going back down to Texas, 36,000 registrations did not have a match in the Social Security database. Sure, you can argue that some people's names, birthdays, and last four didn't match properly. There were typos. But this many?
Yeah, 15%, 13% of the people.
That's way, way too much. And so
it's with all the illegal immigration. It's like correlated with all this illegal immigration.
if we jump to the latest numbers, which is July 13th, I believe Missouri has 27,371 with 3,347 that did not have a match. 317 were dead.
Look at Nevada. That 36,000 of the 37,000 were not matched.
Now that's crazy. This is the latest. The last reported numbers from HAVV, 37,181 in Nevada. These are alleged registration attempts without ID, and 36,600 did not match the SSA database.
In a swing state.
In a swing state.
A border state.
So here's my concern, and this could impact Missouri. It's bright red, so I would, it is weird to be like, well, what could possibly go, happen? Texas, however, is not, and Texas could swing. But the fear now is that in 2021, Joe Biden signed an executive order that allowed the federal government to register people in states on behalf of that state without the state knowing. West Virginia came out and said, absolutely not. We reject all of these registrations. But what if what we're seeing is unknown to these states like Missouri, because these registrations that are being sent to the SSA are coming from federal authorities and the state has nothing to do with it. These people then show up, get printed, that they appear in these databases because the federal government sends in the paperwork, and then you end up with non-citizens. Or one theory is that what's happening is someone is illicitly downloading college and university databases and then trying to register college students who are not registered without them knowing, so that a universal mail-in vote will appear at their home, and then they could get an activist to go make them fill it out.
It's scary stuff. I mean, look, we know that in 2020, several of the blue states changed the rules of the game in the 11th hour in order to harvest more ballots, and that swung the election. I mean, you look at that juxtaposed with the deep state, suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story. I mean, those things, you put those two things together, and you can see why people, the integrity, like self-evident integrity of the process has been lost.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big issues. Voters this year are primed to be concerned about what's going on. And while that's good, it also encourages low trust because you never seem to get the answers that you're looking for. No matter, try how you might, right? We don't know why the numbers are this way. There's not even a clear path to get answers.
Yeah. I guess I can only say you're up for re-election, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be prudent to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and in fact, you're going to see more coming out of my office in the coming weeks about some election integrity issues that we're working on as it relates to illegal aliens. Missouri is one of the last states in the nation that still makes it a felony offense to knowingly transport criminal aliens into or through the state of Missouri. And so we want to stand by to help prosecute that. In Missouri, it's also illegal to obtain a voter ID and hold yourself out to be a lawful resident who's eligible to vote if you're not. So again, that's a felony forgery.
I imagine Missouri is one of the states that requires an ID to vote.
That's right.
It's funny how that works, where it's like when there's actual integrity in the voting process, everyone accepts it as normal and it's not even a question. But then these blue states where you don't need an ID to vote, it's racist to ask.
Yeah.
Nobody has a problem in Missouri. I mean, we would be hearing stories left and right from the Democrats and the media being like, oh, Missouri is suppressing the vote.
And you said that Missouri is one of the last states to enforce this felony for transporting illegal immigrants into the state. So that means that other states at one point did this and then repealed it?
So other states have had similar statutes on the books, but have lost court battles. But I think one of the things the court's going to look at when weighing whether or not a state can enforce a measure like that is, does the state have a compelling interest in enforcement? Like, what's the policy problem? And when those statutes were enacted 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have an invasion. We didn't have 10 million people coming across our border illegally. We didn't have election interruptions and interferences from criminal aliens. And so the compelling interest is different now than when these other states lost their court battles. Missouri has not lost that court battle. We still have the statutes on the books and plan to enforce them.
How do you guys handle electronic voting in general? Because I'm concerned that votes are getting flipped behind the scenes by machines, and we don't have access to the source code to verify. Have you sued like Dominion or companies that try and operate without offering their source code to make them open source their software?
We've got paper ballots. in Missouri. and again, like
Universal paper ballots for the state.
look, I mean, I've seen what a secure election looks like. I secured a part of the Nineveh province, Iraq, in 2005 for their national constitutional referendum. And you know what? We pulled up in armored vehicles with boxes of ballots that were locked. We opened the boxes on election day. People lined up. They put their, remember the blue thumbs?
Yeah.
They put their thumbprint on the ballot. We collected them. We drove them to a secure place, and then there was people counting them by hand while we watched. I mean, it's that simple. And again, when you have a simple process that has paper ballots like that, the self-evident, the integrity of the process is self-evident.
So you don't have machines at all?
The machines collect the paper ballots, but then there's human checks on that. But again, this is all under the Secretary of State's office, and that's really who runs elections in the state of Missouri.
Do you get along with the Secretary of State very well? Do you guys work closely?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I work closely with all of our statewide office holders. Everyone's rowing in the same direction. We're all, for the first time in, gosh, a really long time, it's a top to bottom Republicans in state office in Missouri, and that has not happened until recently.
Wow.
That's
Right on.
Yeah.
I'm still concerned about all of this data because it's a story that I mean, we have covered probably like 17 times, and we've never gotten clear answers as to what's going on.
They put it on hold for a while.
Yeah, so that's not. The reporting stopped. Yeah, I think it was in May, or like the beginning of May, just froze.
Like after we started reporting on it, a couple months went by, and then they stopped the reporting completely for like
What coincidence?
5. Yeah, right.
But this
Are there
is
such things.
So we're looking at great polling for Donald Trump, especially after someone tried to take his life, and he stood up with blood coming out his face, screaming, yelling, "Fight, fight, fight!" That really inspired a lot of people. Now you've got, with Kamala Harris coming in, people are saying, "Oh, she's even worse than Biden." But the more savvy people are coming out and saying, "If you think you've won, you've lost," because regardless of what's going on with Biden, Kamala, the DNC, we still have a shadow campaign to contend with, the likes of which we do not know. You're familiar with the Time Magazine shadow campaign story?
I'm not familiar with that.
Let me pull this up and just give you a quick reference. We pull this up periodically. Time Magazine wrote a story. This is, what's the date on this? February 5th, 2021, by Molly Ball. This is the secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election, to which Molly Ball literally writes for Time Magazine, "There was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, one that both curtailed the protests and coordinated the resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists and business titans. The pact was formalized in a terse, little-noticed joint statement of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO published on Election Day. Both sides would come to see it as a sort of implicit bargain inspired by the summer's massive, sometimes destructive racial justice protests in which the forces of labor came together with the forces of capital to keep the peace and oppose Trump's assault on democracy." The article, written not even a month after the inauguration of Joe Biden, talks about how CEOs, Zuckerbucks, changing in voting laws, people worked behind a shadow campaign. If you want to call that rigging an election, by all means, go ahead and do so. I like to use their words and say they ran a conspiracy, that's what Molly Ball called it, shadow campaign to secure the election, to save us from Trump. And that's where we're at now. So now that it's 3 months out from this next election, the great fear is that they didn't stop.
Yeah.
There's something else working behind the scenes. So, I mean, that's why I just real quick, I appreciate having you here, especially because of the lawsuits you filed, because you seem to be one of the very few people actually doing something.
Well, and, our lawsuit, Missouri v. Biden, the most important First Amendment case in this nation's history, we're back down at the trial court level using merits discovery to root out the censorship enterprise from the Biden regime. What we're talking about is collusion between activists, corporate America, organized labor there. I think there's another element there, another layer, and that's the deep state. Again, we uncovered, as part of Missouri v. Biden, the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, that the FBI was in possession of the laptop 1 year before the election and planted the seed in big tech that there would be a Russian disinformation campaign related to to Hunter Biden, right? And then they met with increased frequency between DOJ, FBI, and big tech oligarchs in the weeks and months leading up to that story breaking, and then it was suppressed instantly. That's not coincidental. That is government suppression of critical information that Americans needed to make good decisions at the ballot box. And so that's just one more layer when you've got the deep state. And is anyone surprised? Remember the Peter Strzok, Lisa Page text messages in 2016, like before Trump was even in the Oval Office, the deep state was already plotting against him. And so, I mean, people stop trusting our systems when they see and learn about stuff.
What were those texts, Lisa Strzok and...
Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. They were, FBI agent and Department of Justice official that were conspiring and colluding to undermine the first years of President Trump's administration by injecting this Russian collusion hoax. And they were successful at that. I mean, they dropped the poison pill in the well that we drank from for several years.
Yeah, I feel the Iranian, and they said an Iranian attempt on Trump's life, that's another poison pill, I think. I can feel it.
I got probably a serious question for you. You're filing these lawsuits. You're uncovering this collusion, deep state elements, intelligence agents. Chuck Schumer said they got 6 ways from Sunday from getting back at you. I just wondered if you had a food taster.
That's a good idea. Yeah,
and I'm saying it in a somewhat half-joking way.
You're right. I mean, look, the deep state has ways of getting back at people. They did it to President Trump. They're doing it to everyday Americans in ways we don't see. Again, let's talk about in the context of censorship. Again, that's government censorship of information that interferes with an election. That's enormously problematic for obvious reasons. But they're censoring conservative voices on big tech social media platforms. They are changing our culture in ways that we don't see. And it's much more pernicious and nefarious than in any point in human history. Like if Joseph Stalin goes and shuts down a printing press, the whole world knows it's happened. They can see it. And he's only silenced the printed word. But what's happening now, if you're shadow banned, deplatformed, de-emphasized, if the story never breaks because it's suppressed, we're not only deprived. First of all, we don't know the censorship is going on. And it's not only the speaker's rights who've been violated, but the listeners as well, who may not know that they were going to receive a message that now they can't hear. But it's also the big tech, because the way in which we communicate is so much more multidimensional than just a simple printing press. It's visual imagery, it's body language, it's all these other forms of communication that are being suppressed. And again, that's enormously harmful to who we are as a people.
How much you want to bet the IRS is specifically targeting people based on politics, and how do you track for that? It's very difficult. We know that happened during the Obama years with the Tea Party, that there's this big scandal involving the IRS targeting conservatives. Why would we assume that stopped? They announced 87,000 new agents. Apparently, I guess audits are way up. That's been something I've heard.
I've heard too.
Yeah, if someone wants to fact check that. And when they announced they were doing this, Biden says only if you make $400,000 or more, we're going to raise your taxes. Yeah, 87,000 agents aren't to raise your taxes. They would raise your taxes to raise your taxes. 87,000 agents are so they can comb through your financials, and then one day, working class small business mom and pop shop that makes cheeseburgers gets a letter from the IRS that says you owe us $384, and they're like, "What's this for? We paid our taxes. Our accountant did all the work for us. We don't have this money. What are you gonna do? Hire a lawyer? No, you're gonna have to write the check." And that's what they're doing to the working class people. I'd be willing to bet it's politically biased as well, because you suppress economically your political opponents, makes it harder for them to take the time off to go vote, simply put. And to make your point about censorship, one thing we learned with Dr. Robert Epstein, Google and Facebook are having a massive impact on the election. He explained that it's actually really simple. They ran a test. On Election Day, in one of their tests, Facebook sent out a reminder to vote to 100% of Democrats. I think it was Democrats, left-leaning. I think it was in the U.S. And only like 60-some-odd% of people on the right. So what happens? It's just that easy. That's the manipulative game that they play across the board. And we're trying to fight against that. Now, that being said, with the way things are going, I'm not confident they're succeeding.
Yeah, I wonder if you could tell us what... Because you've taken a lot of really bold action. I mean, you've lost against Media Matters, Planned Parenthood, the Biden administration, New York State. But you're also fairly young in your career. I mean, what was the calculation going into this? Like, I think there are some people, and I'm glad you're not one of them, who would say, like, I don't want to anger too many higher powers.
Right. No, I that's not a concern of mine. I don't want to be a politician. I want to be the attorney general and do the job for the right reasons. I have no interest in politics. You got to be a politician to be the attorney general. I get that. But, first of all, there's nothing that's going to happen to me in politics that is going to be any worse than my worst day, overseas in Iraq. I've spent 2 years overseas in the war on terror. So, like, I'm not scared of it. Like, it's just
the worst is kind of behind you right now.
It's not a fear of mine.
For reference, you were in the Army in...
Served in the Army after the war, in the war on terror, was an armored cavalry scout, platoon leader, and then executive officer and troop commander eventually. But yeah, I mean, having led soldiers in combat like that, and having the privilege to get to do that, the politics of it doesn't scare me. But I'm not like trying to climb a ladder to a higher office. So I have a little more audacity to do the right things and to be on attack. And I think too, like one of the first things you learn in the Army, light infantry tactics. When you're caught in a near ambush, you assault into the ambush. You don't turn and run away because you'll just get shot in the back. You're going to die anyway. Kill some bad guys on your way out. And that's kind of how I approach my job.
That's cool. I really think that that's like a boldness that a lot of people don't have. I think there is a fear that, like, if you challenge the Biden administration, right, you'll upset the governor who's relying on the federal government for tax money or whatever. There's some kind of interwoven web, but I like that you're saying, like, I am here for this job and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, because I think that that's what restores Americans' trust in their elected officials, that they are actively doing the things that are hard and difficult and not thinking, oh, well, but I want to move up to a higher office.
Why are you like the only AG actually doing stuff?
I partner with like-minded state attorneys general a lot. Last year, we partnered on 164 cases together. So there's a lot of partnership and overlap. Missouri is uniquely positioned for a variety of reasons. Number one, because we are a red state, but we're recently a red state. And so, like, if you think about conservative states traditionally have not empowered their state attorneys general because conservatives view it as a zero-sum game, more government, less freedom. And so conservative states that have limited the authority of their AGs. Meanwhile, blue states like Letitia James, her General Assembly gives her any kind of law she wants to conduct lawfare and every other pernicious, attack on our way of life. Missouri is uniquely positioned because we're so recently a blue state that has now transitioned. We were a blue state, are now a red state. And so it's like the enemy has left weapons on the battlefield that we're picking up and learning how to use. There's like this retreating enemy that's left these weapons on the battlefield. And so the Missouri Attorney General's office has some really unique statutory authority that isn't replicated in other states. But then again, I also think when you've got someone in office who just wants to be the AG and do the right things for the right reasons. And look, America's under attack. I mean, we're absolutely under attack. You can't call this anything else. Our basic values, our way of life, our systems of democratic processes, I mean, all those things are under attack.
We have another caravan of 3,000 migrants. We've had these caravans coming to the United States by the thousands and tens of thousands for years now. And it's just, they don't care. Our border czar, who is now running is a presumptive nominee, she never went to the border one time? Did she end up going eventually?
I don't think so. I mean, they might have shuffled her down there. Let me double check right now. But the thing is, she was like the border czar, and then immediately everyone stopped trying to talk about the border. I mean, Joe Biden didn't go to the border until, the second half of his current term. It was always something where, and I think you're kind of referencing this, where the values are not in alignment. They'll say, oh, yeah, we're taking care of the border by putting up new cameras and maybe we'll have new agents or something. But what they mean is we don't actually care that people are illegally crossing into the United States. We're actually kind of okay with it. In fact, maybe we'll create this app and maybe another app to make it easier.
Yeah, they're legitimizing. They're perverting the law to try to put an imprimatur of legitimization on illegal crossings. Mm-hmm. So it's not just that they refuse to build the border wall that they were commanded by Congress to do and we sued them and won on that lawsuit. It's not just that they are catch and release and repealing remain in Mexico. We should not be catching and releasing, and caravans should remain in Mexico if they're going to seek asylum. But it's perversion of like the parole process. Parole under immigration laws for individualized determinations for limited entry, for limited purpose, limited amount of time. Well, by Biden saying, hey, we're going to allow 10,000 Guatemalans, he's creating a visa program that was never authorized by Congress. Again, that's how he's perverting the law. So it's not just that he's not enforcing, he's hung an open sign and inviting. Mm-hmm. And those are.
Oh, this is what's wild is that all of these violate the rights of each individual state who has not had, this is the point of the Senate.
Yeah. So
that the states are represented the federal government before they do these things. Biden ignoring that is basically just trampling over the states.
That's right.
Yeah, and to the detriment of the people, right? I mean, I remember seeing this report from Massachusetts saying they had so many illegal immigrants in the state that their shelters were completely full. These are shelters that are typically for, homeless people or women and children fleeing domestic violence situations. Like, it's the resources that people in need that, in a desperate situation rely on that are now being diverted to solve this crisis that we don't actually have to have. The Biden administration just said on day one, we hated Trump so much, we're going to reverse whatever he's doing, and we're not going to think about the consequences of this because we're trying to score this political point that we aren't Trump, and look at this posturing we can pull off.
Well, I think it goes back to something you said earlier, which is that the left has rejected practical good, any pursuit of practical good, in favor of radical, progressive, woke ideology. You see that in the border. You see that in transgender issues. I mean, you see that across the board with all these issues. They have criminal justice. Again, the Soros-backed prosecutors don't enforce the law. And you know what? Victims suffer. It undermines the credibility of our criminal justice system. And all of that is, again, they are putting woke, progressive ideology ahead of practical good. Both parties used to pursue practical good. We just had different arguments about how to get there. And now the left has completely rejected practical good.
Let's jump to the story from Just the News. Supreme Court orders New York to respond to Missouri lawsuit over Trump lawfare this week. This seems pretty big. Is this a victory for you guys?
Yeah, this is huge. I mean, the Supreme Court has taken notice of the lawsuit we filed against the state of New York. And again, you've got a rogue prosecutor and collusive judiciary in New York who have prosecuted Donald Trump under specious legal grounds. The prosecution is replete with constitutional procedural error, ethics violations, should have never happened. I've never seen such a gross miscarriage of justice, but that's what you get in New York. And at the end of the day, that hurts Missourians in every other state because we have a right to participate in a national presidential election on equal footing with every other sovereign state. And Missourians are being denied access to and being denied the ability to hear from a presidential candidate in the heat of a campaign in the most consequential national election in this country's history. And so that harms Missourians.
So you filed, I should say, on behalf of the state of Missouri, you sued New York, its original jurisdiction. So the Supreme Court is the court that hears it. We announced the news when it broke, and many people said, but wait, Supreme Court's out of session. How does this work?
Yeah, different dockets. So you've got kind of the Supreme Court's appellate review docket, and that's what mostly the Supreme Court does, is review cases that have been adjudicated at a lower court. But the Founding Fathers contemplated there would be disputes amongst the states, and they codified a method by which we could redress those grievances in Article 3, Section 2 of the United States Constitution. And it's the original action docket. And so that's separate and apart from kind of their appellate review. And so other states have sued other states before. Typically, it's about like water rights or boundaries. This is different because, again, we're suing the state of New York for hijacking this election and injecting poison into our democratic process through lawfare. But it's an original action of the Supreme Court. We filed our pleadings. The court has ordered New York to respond. They have until tomorrow to respond. We'll see what they do.
There are 3 claims you're making?
That's correct. Yeah. Number 1, First Amendment violation. The gag order that the court instituted in New York is unconstitutional. It violates President Trump's right to speak, but it violates our right to hear from him. And the important point here is like the gag orders in criminal prosecutions, there's a strong presumption against gag orders because of our First Amendment rights. But that's especially true, and those considerations are heightened when you're talking about a presidential candidate.
A front runner.
But beyond that, the gag order is supposed to protect a defendant's right to a fair trial. Well, number 1, the trial's over. Number 2, here the prosecutor got the gag order. If Donald Trump wants to put himself at risk by speaking out publicly about the trial, he should be allowed to do that. And we have a right to hear from him. So that's the first claim. The second claim is that, in Missouri, we had a caucus, and there were electors who were selected based on that caucus to attend the convention and cast votes for President Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee. Those electors are being denied access to a presidential candidate because anytime he's spinning in a Manhattan courtroom or potentially in a New York State penitentiary or on probation in New York, he can't be campaigning. And that harms our ability to have access to him. The third claim is under the Purcell Doctrine. So the Purcell Doctrine stands for the proposition that courts should stay out of decisions that would obfuscate or interfere with an election. And again, those considerations are heightened the closer in time you get to an election. And so the same should be true in New York. People are already asking me, constituents reach out all the time. Can Donald Trump be on the ballot? Am I going to get to vote for him? Is he going to get to come to Missouri and talk to us? Can he still serve as president if he's convicted of a felony in New York? So this New York court is violating the Purcell Doctrine by injecting that kind of level of obfuscation into the electoral process.
This is absolutely crazy because it brings up a lot of questions. Now, we know any reasonable person who reviews the criminal charges against Donald Trump in the hush money case would scratch their head and say, what?
Yeah.
None of this makes sense. And I'll break it down because I know there's people who haven't watched every show, but I'll try and make it quick. The charges against Donald Trump are for falsification of business records, but that's a misdemeanor, and it's beyond its statute of limitations, meaning they can't bring the charges. What are we talking, 7 years later? They claim it's upgraded to a felony if you falsify business records in furtherance of a secondary crime. Now, they claimed that Donald Trump, the judge said to the jury, if you believe Donald Trump committed a secondary crime, it doesn't matter which one, then you can find him guilty on this one if you believe he also falsified business records. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but how does a court, first of all, upgrade a charge with the presumption of a secondary crime that has never been adjudicated through any kind of due process means or anything?
Yeah.
The court is just decreeing the crime exists.
That's right. And two problems there from a constitutional standpoint. Number one, lack of notice. 34 count indictment that, again, refers to, false business entry for this based on another crime. And you can read the indictment. It says another crime 34 times, 34 counts. That's a notice violation under the due process clause. President Trump has a right to have notice of the alleged offense. So they deprived him of due process in that regard. Jury unanimity is under the Sixth Amendment is the next problem. So when the jury goes back to deliberate and the judge says, hey, pick any old predicate offense you want, you don't have to agree. Under Ramos v. Louisiana case that was handed down by the United States Supreme Court in 2020, stands for the proposition that the Sixth Amendment right to fair trial includes the right to jury unanimity as to every element for which the defendant is charged.
Wow.
So they violated his constitutional rights to due process, violated his First Amendment right to free speech, violated his Sixth Amendment right to jury unanimity. You look at the fact that the prosecutors were politically motivated because they campaigned on a promise to prosecute President Trump. They should have been disqualified. The judge has deep ties to the Democratic Party, also should have been disqualified. In Missouri, it's an appearance of impropriety standard. Well, here there's actual impropriety. It's not an appearance.
Not an appearance at all.
It exists. So they should have been, this is reversible error. It's an incurable impropriety. When I say that the case is an illicit witch hunt prosecution, that's what we're talking about. Is all of these problems that typically in a criminal trial, maybe you have one problem that results in what could be reversible error. But here it's replete with reversible error.
Isn't this an emergency? Isn't this something the Supreme Court should take up within hours and shut it down?
And that's the point. Everyone's like, look, if President Trump was wrongfully convicted, his appeal will figure that out. That's insufficient. That vehicle for raising these claims is insufficient to adjudicate the grievance that the state of Missouri and the voting public in Missouri has against the state of New York. The individual appeal process will vindicate President Trump individually, but that's going to take 18 to 24 months. And we can't wait because the election is forthcoming.
So the Supreme Court said New York has to respond by tomorrow, which means what exactly?
Well, we'll see what we'll see what New York files. I mean, they have a reply to our lawsuit, and they'll either try to convince the court that the lawsuit should not go forward. They could concede that there's a problem. I don't anticipate they would do that.
To clarify, does your lawsuit, does it raise claims to those due process violations against Donald Trump?
Yeah, those are central to, that's central to the argument that this is lawfare, not a legitimate criminal prosecution. Again, the objective in New York was never to obtain a legally valid conviction. It was always to take President Trump off the campaign trail and silence him. And they were effective at doing that. And that harms Missourians and all voters.
That's absolutely insane at a most basic democratic level that you have 50 participants in an election where each state will cast a ballot, and you've got several states that are like, well, our clear choice is Trump, but we'll see what happens. So 1/50th of the nation decides we will do whatever we have to destroy his opportunity to actually run a campaign. That is the most obvious and egregious election interference imaginable. Now, if it was something like Donald Trump shot a guy on Fifth Avenue and everybody saw it happen, well, I don't know what leg you got to stand on. States can bring charges against people if everybody watched and there's a preponderance of evidence. Then you go to trial and he can prove his innocence beyond a reasonable doubt, et cetera, et cetera. But here we're looking at any reasonable person. And we saw this with Fareed Zakaria. He said these charges would not have been brought against someone whose name was not Donald Trump. Even CNN admits it.
Yeah. And this statute has never been used in New York in the way in which they're using it against President Trump. Two other points I want to make real quick. You've also got this problem when you talk about the statute of limitations. Again, that is even more problematic in this instance because the statute that creates the offense for which Donald Trump was charged, I think it's New York Code 175.10, but it allows for an affirmative defense. And when you've got an affirmative defense, that requires the defendant, who typically doesn't have any burden of proof, to, by preponderance of the evidence, establish that he is legally excused from what would otherwise be criminal behavior. The due process violation is worse in this context because how can he take advantage of his statutorily granted affirmative defense and gather evidence to defend himself if he doesn't know what the predicate offense is?
Right. He just has to kind of prepare for anything, like it's a weird pop quiz.
Again, and that's the due process violation is worse in this instance because of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. I mean, at a most fundamental level, we as children learn about the right to confront your accusers.
Yeah.
And Trump never got it, right?
For what offense was he charged? We don't know.
Yeah.
Sounds like he's going to get it. The Supreme Court was out of session, and I was angered by, like, well, come on, guys, it's not summer camp, like, get to work. But you said that they somehow were able to legislate from out of session. How does that work?
Yeah, so there's again, it's the difference between their term in which they review appeals to the Supreme Court. That's a separate docket, and that term has ended. But original actions they're never out of term when it comes to original actions. Those are always filed directly with the United States Supreme Court. It's novel. I mean, it doesn't happen too often that states have lawsuits against other states, especially claims like this. But again, it's imperative because of where we are in this election cycle. And so the Supreme Court is absolutely reviewing these cases now, as evidenced by the fact that they ordered New York to respond.
Did they have to go back to the wherever they work from, or did they do it remote?
Yeah, I believe they could do it remotely. I know that the documents that we file with the court are all printed on paper and distributed to the justices. So, look, the justices and their clerks are aware of the lawsuit. They're reviewing the lawsuit. They've issued orders in the lawsuit. This process is moving forward. And again, we anticipate that we need to act quickly, and we anticipate the court will act.
So what argument could New York possibly have? I mean, what could they possibly say to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I'm interested to see what arguments they raise. I mean, they could defend the legitimacy of the prosecution, and then we get to, again, respond with all of these constitutional and ethical
But even
problems.
when it was coming out, there were all kinds of people already, all media commentators on the left saying, like, oh, no, Trump's definitely going to appeal this. Like, this was sketchy. This was not right.
So there's a possibility that within a week, the Supreme Court just obliterates the whole New York hush money case. They just say outright, we nullify it, or what?
Yeah, I think the prayer for relief here, first of all, yes, these cases need to go away. All of the lawfare against President Trump those cases need to be dismissed or judgment entered notwithstanding the verdicts. And we've moved, as the state of Missouri, we filed a brief in the New York case demanding that the judge dismiss the indictment and vacate the judgment.
The Supreme Court, have they already ruled on standing?
They have not yet. So again, these are arguments.
They could come out next week and say Missouri has no right to sue New York.
They could.
I kind of feel like that's what to do, because you've got Thomas and Alito, and the rest are sit on their hands types.
Yeah, and I think it's time we have an open and honest conversation in this country about standing. It's a jurisprudential concern, and under Article 3, the federal courts are limited to hearing cases and controversies between parties. You got to show a concrete harm from a direct action of the defendant. I get all that. Those are important for individual cases. However, when you have states bringing claims, is it time to review our standing analysis, and for that analysis to evolve in a way that gives more latitude to allow for states to raise claims on behalf of the people of the state?
This was the Texas v. Pennsylvania back in 2020. The Supreme Court ruled on standing, I believe, right?
Yep, after 3 days.
They said Texas has no right to argue about Pennsylvania's elections.
That's right. And here's the distinction between that case. First of all, that lasted 3 days, and or maybe it was a few more, but I don't think they got to 10 days. And our case against New York, what the case, that previous case was asking was for the Supreme Court to redo an election. And the courts, again, under the Purcell Doctrine, they don't want to get involved in administering elections or reviewing elections or having anything to do with that. So that was a tall order. This is different, and this case has already gone longer and is receiving review. And, honestly, the court may sit on this case and withhold a decision until sentencing, because what the New York trial court does could change the whole landscape. And 2 arguments here. Number 1, if the court were to sentence Donald Trump to prison, well, then the Supreme Court might say, okay, now this is way more important to us. Number 2, and we've made this argument both at the Supreme Court and at the trial court level, but after the immunity decision was handed down by the Supreme Court, you can go back and look at some of the evidence that was introduced in the criminal trial in New York and realize that's the fruit of the poisonous tree. That evidence should have never been used to obtain a criminal conviction because the president was immune from some of that behavior, as we all knew kind of going into that. Right. So the New York court clearly raced ahead of SCOTUS to obtain that conviction. But all of those things are playing out. And I think that's why the court has paused and has taken a hard look at this.
And sentencing's in September now?
That's correct, yeah. And so there are things that could happen at the trial court level that could alter the trajectory of the case that's pending at the United States Supreme Court.
Let's jump to this story, which will serve as a segue into the darker conversation. This is from the New York Times. Secret Service director resigns after Trump assassination attempt. Kimberly A. Cheadle gave up her post Tuesday after security failures that allowed a gunman to shoot at former President Donald J. Trump at an open-air rally. I'd like to pause real quick. Can I fix this? They accidentally put at. I'll just say, Kimberly A. Cheadle gave up her post Tuesday after security failures allowed a gunman to shoot former President Donald J. Trump at an open-air rally, who, might I remind everybody, and the New York Times especially, had blood coming down his face from where the bullet struck him in the ear.
Right.
That was not
injured in shooting.
He was shot. Right? And that's just it. I understand the assumption when someone's shot is that they have a bullet wound in their body, okay? But I don't think we need to play semantics in the fact that this guy shot Trump in the ear. Trump was shot in the ear, okay? We just say it like that. Now, I don't believe this resignation is sufficient. I believe that there is either, at bare minimum, criminal negligence, but I think most reasonable people can conclude, based on all of the statements, media reports, law enforcement statements, whistleblowers, etc., that this was allowed to happen. And beyond that, you question, if it was allowed to happen, who's this 20-year-old guy to randomly show up? This idea that it was just a bunch of accidents doesn't make sense. They first said that the roof was sloped, so they couldn't get the law enforcement on the roof. The roof was not sloped. That's a lie. Rep Eli Crane was there standing on the roof, and he's like, what are you talking about? It's a very low grade. Then you had statements that actually there were law enforcement up there, but they were too hot. Then you have questions about the windows being unsecure, the water tower being unsecure. You have the rooftop that was totally insecure. Donald Trump being released with an active threat. The Secret Service knew of an active threat, and they still released Trump from holding. All of these things could not be an accident. So I'll just say, as she's resigning, there are many members of Congress who are asking the question about, was there in some official capacity, intentional actions taken against Donald Trump? And I know it's very difficult subject matter, but looking at all the evidence that's come out in the media, I don't know how you conclude that the story is just some crazy 20-year-old who got lucky. It doesn't make sense.
And I think one of the other problems is, she resigns and it doesn't make it okay. There still has to be an investigation. Mayorkas has this independent panel that he's saying is bipartisan. Mayorkas himself is being kind of sketchy. People were saying that he was, declining to appear before the House Oversight Committee, even though the DHS is in charge of the Secret Service ultimately. I think one of the big problems is that we know that there are so many unanswered questions. And Cheadle's testimony yesterday really proved that they are not willing to be honest with the public, and they are really trying to sort of cover up, or it feels like they're trying to cover up what happened. And I don't know that we can trust the federal government to investigate itself.
That roof was 150 yards away, roughly, from Donald Trump, and AR-15 fires about 400 yards. That's insane that it wasn't secured. I don't know if it was intentional, but that's either total insanity or they intentionally didn't secure a dangerous shooting spot. And then I was listening to Chris Martinson on Twitter really breaking down the audio from the shooting, and you hear two distinct guns. I mean, it's pop, 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 pop. Like it's three low-sounding, humming shots, and then five like high-pitched ones. He says it sounds directly like it's coming from two different guns. Still, doesn't imply that they let it happen or that they did it intentionally, but like. I don't know. Obviously, it looks like she was covering something up in the hearing yesterday because she was like, I can't disclose that. I can't disclose that. I can't disclose that.
The reason why I wanted to jump from our previous segment, which was talking about the lawfare, the Supreme Court rulings against New York, the actions being taken by New York are unprecedented. Criminal charges against Trump without proper due process, accusing Trump of a crime that Trump has never, they've never told Trump what crime that was. And in 2020, we had Texas v. Pennsylvania, states lining up against states. And now we're at the point where somehow every possible security failure happened which allowed a man to shoot Donald Trump in the ear, nearly taking his life, but not for a few millimeters. And the concern is, when this happened, you even have Logan and Jake Paul saying, if that bullet were a few millimeters away, we would have had a civil war. Now, I'm supposed to be the guy ranting on the street corner with the sign saying civil war, but now you've got after this, the conversation has become so ridiculously mainstream. Even Jake and Logan Paul on their podcast are like, wow, we almost had a civil war. I can't believe what's happening in this country. With what we're seeing with the attempt on Trump's life, with the things you've uncovered, A.G. Bailey, about deep state collusion and censorship, are we at risk of some kind of national level internal conflict? And I want to preface this with, I am not saying civil war. That's one of the components, but it could be balkanization. It could be something along the lines of individual states like declaring themselves sanctuaries from federal authority to a more greater degree. Do you see that as a possibility in any way?
I think it's certainly a risk. I mean, look, people are fed up. They're tired of it. They're tired of being told how to think, what you can and can't say. They're tired of us eroding our national sovereignty through the Biden invasion. They're tired of the fact that they're working all day, they come home at night, and their dollars don't spend as well because of the inflation. And they're tired of stuff like this. And this woman, refusing to answer questions or provide any kind of transparency or any kind of coherent explanation to what is clearly a massive failure in security protocols. And when I was securing sensitive sites in Iraq as a platoon leader, we never would have allowed, to your point, an elevated platform within 150 yards of the secure site. Like, you don't do that. And that happened here. And there's a reason that happened. And she owes us an explanation. And her resignation does not excuse the officials from that. But going back to the point I made early on, the part of the problem is this rise in the administrative state. We no longer rely on Congress to pass laws and the executive branch to enforce those laws, and we no longer respect state sovereignty because we have this mushrooming administrative state, this alphabet soup of agencies that have this authority and aren't accountable to the electorate because they're bureaucrats that aren't elected. And so we need to slash and burn the administrative state. The overturning the Chevron doctrine, the reinvigoration of the major questions doctrine in the previous two Supreme Court terms, those are weapons in our legal arsenal to fight back against the administrative state.
Do you want to explain the Chevron ruling?
Yeah, so Chevron was a farce that was put forth in the 1980s by the Supreme Court that essentially required the federal judiciary to defer to a federal agency's reasonable interpretation of their own authority. That's an abdication of the court's role under Article 3 to determine what the law is. It goes all the way back to Marbury v. Madison. The courts determine what the law is. And so this never worked. And that, again, it excused Congress from actually doing their jobs and writing statutes, writing laws. It allowed for this mushrooming exponential growth in the administrative state.
It allowed for the ATF to unilaterally declare if you owned a pistol brace, you were a felon. That blew my mind. I'm like, wait. I went to a gun store. I filled out my paperwork. They told me pistol braces were totally fine and legal. And I said, okay. And then a few months later, this story breaks and they're like, by the way, so I call my lawyer and he's like, take them off your weapons and separate them, bring them to a separate property or store them separately. And you're illegally allowed to have them so long as they're not attached. And I said, how did a department, bureau just decide something was a crime?
Luckily, Missouri filed suit and won that lawsuit to put a stop to that. Because you're right. I mean, look, we're always the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. That's the words, shall not be infringed. And in Missouri, Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution protects not only firearms, but ammunition and accessories as well, and obligates the state to stand up and fight to protect our God-given right to not only firearms, but ammunition and accessories. So I was proud to file that lawsuit and get a win.
Did the overturning of the Chevron doctrine then eliminate or repeal all these things that had been done using the Chevron doctrine?
No, but it gives us better legal footing to challenge them. And it means that that the tie doesn't go to the agency anymore. The agency's going to have to account for whether or not they're adhering to the plain text of the statutes that authorize them to perform certain functions.
But I like the messaging around this when the Chevron ruling came out. Every mainstream media outlet, a lot of left-leaning ones were like, well, they're not letting experts make decisions. This is so crazy. I mean, it is this. It
That's
really
our Constitution.
Right, and it feels like we're in parallel worlds,
Well,
right? Where there are some people who are like, well, here's the Constitution, and here is what we would like to happen, and everyone else being like, no, you guys are crazy.
That point was on full display in March when I sat at council table and we argued the case Missouri v. Biden. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson asked the question, well, isn't it it seems like the First Amendment really hamstrings the government's ability to respond to an emergency. It's like, yes, that's the point. It is an irreducible axiomatic principle that the rights that we enjoy come from God, not man, that the Constitution exists to protect us from the government exists to protect our rights. And in this era, we see government repeatedly weaponized against us. That is antithetical to who we are as an American.
What was the other? You said the Supreme Court overturned the Chevron doctrine.
Yeah, major questions doctrine is the other one.
What's that?
And so that one says that Congress doesn't hide an elephant in a mouse hole. And so you see that in West Virginia v. EPA. You see it in my lawsuit that we won when President Biden first tried to cancel student loan debt. And what the court has said is that, look, if Congress intends to institute a program on this order of like social, economic, political magnitude, Congress has to speak explicitly in the text of the statute. The president has to point to the exact words in the law that allow him to do that, and with a fine print. And Congress has not so authorized the president. And that's why we won that lawsuit. That's why West Virginia won that lawsuit against the EPA. And so those are two independent founts of legal authority to fight back against the rise of the administrative state. But attorneys general will always be playing a game of whack-a-mole. We need Congress and a president who are willing to, again, slash and burn that alphabet soup. I mean, why do we have a federal Department of Education? What role does the federal government? Our founding fathers never intended that bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. would have anything to do with our schools and at the state level. So things like that.
And it's just bloat now. It's just
it's government job welfare.
Exactly. They're one of the concerns that you often hear is, look, yes, but we got to do it slowly because if we slash 5,000 jobs, the economic damage. It's like, no, dude. Like, we're not just giving people money for no reason. That's ridiculous.
I kind of appreciate some sort of national regulation on education in that if one school was teaching someone that 2 + 2 = 3, and then another school is like, no, it's 2, then you're going to have a problem, and we're not going to be able to communicate as a society. So I understand, but I don't think we need an entire department. I've learned in recent years, because I agree with you about the bloat. I think it just turns into people getting hired.
The founders intended the federal government to be a government of a limited authority, and under the 10th Amendment, which says that any authority not given to the federal government, denied to the states, is enjoyed by the states and the people of the states. The states are governments of unlimited authority, limited only by their own constitutions or the federal constitution. So the only point I'm making is that education is left to the states, and it's up to states to regulate that. The federal government was never authorized or empowered under the enumerated powers given to the federal government to have anything to do with education. And that's just one example. I mean, again, pick out of a hat any federal agency and let's determine whether or not there's enumerated authority for that agency in our Constitution.
I feel like Americans have been sort of brainwashed to think of it as being the federal government above all else.
Right.
We follow them first. They forget the importance of their state government.
It drives me bonkers when I hear people say, well, the supremacy clause. Like, no. The supremacy clause doesn't mean that the federal government is supreme to the states on all things. That's not what that means. The supremacy clause is an interpretive tool. When you have a federal statute and a state statute that cannot coexist and be synthesized, and that the federal statute is duly constitutionally valid, then the federal statute trumps the state statute. But again, that's only when you have an irreconcilable difference. That rarely occurs. It's an interpretive tool, not an independent fount of legal authority.
What would happen if the Supreme Court comes out and says, we don't care that New York is doing these things?
We go back to the drawing board and we go find another tool to get to work on this problem.
But I see the problem here as potentially an unstoppable force and an immovable object. It is clear to any reasonable person that New York is just acting extrajudicially. They're using the force and threat of violence that they control at the state level to lock up, stop, and steal the 2024 election. It doesn't mean they're guaranteed to do it, but they're certainly trying to.
Yeah.
We know that you can't criminally charge someone for, quote, another crime, end quote. The Constitution doesn't allow that. If the Supreme Court doesn't answer this, and I feel like they won't, then, well, Missouri can't just say we accept that the game is broke, that the rules are rigged, and it's impossible to win. I mean, people across this country will lose their minds and as this continually devolves. But as we've already seen, Tucker Carlson predicted in September that with the amount of lawfare against Donald Trump, we are moving into assassination territory. Now, a week ago, someone actually shot Donald Trump narrowly missing him, his skull, but hitting his ear, we were but millimeters away from Trump losing his life.
And then
I can't discount everything that Tucker Carlson was suggesting when he was saying something like that is predictable because of what's happening before it. That is to say, the presumption is there are powerful forces that have tried every means possible to stop Donald Trump. They accused him of being a traitor. It did not work. They waged lawfare in terms of impeachment twice. It did not work. They created new laws in New York to civilly sue Donald Trump for sexual assault, which made no sense. The story was completely ludicrous. They've changed the rules every single step of the way just to say we can and we will. In Georgia, they're going after Donald Trump. The federal documents case, they went for Trump. Now, of course, that one was recently defeated. Trump is winning every step of the way. The speculation around the presidential immunity ruling from the Supreme Court was that they would say, of course, the president enjoys immunity as to his constitutional duties. But for anything outside that, he does not. That was fairly obvious. What I didn't see any pundit predict was that they would additionally say, you cannot use any action that was in his official capacity as evidence of wrongdoing, which basically crushed the hush money case in New York, postponing the sentencing and allowing Donald Trump not to be sentenced to prison on July 11th, right before the RNC, where he was, of course, going to give his speech, accept the nomination, be the presidential nominee, and name his VP. And then 2 days after that, he gets shot in the ear in an unprecedented security failure, the likes of which you have never seen, and makes no sense to former Secret Service like Dan Bongino, former Army snipers. I believe Eli Crane was an Army sniper. There have been many people who have commented on this, who are in Congress. I believe Corey Mills as well, saying none of this makes sense. Dan Bongino pointing out that at Secret Service, you'd block line of sight if you couldn't secure the roof. They didn't do that. You'd blur out the windows. They didn't do that. They didn't. None of it makes sense. And so my fear is there's a reason Tucker Carlson made the prediction in September that he did, and they attacked him for it. But sure enough, ended up happening. Now we are looking at, we know for a fact, those of us that are watching, that New York is just, there's no law. There's none. Merrick Garland and the Her tapes, there's no law. Joe Biden broke the law the same as Trump. They say we're not going to prosecute.
The problem is evil law. It's different than no.
No.
Evil.
No, there's no law. Okay, there's no law. Merrick Garland defies a congressional subpoena, and they say, so what? He can do whatever he wants. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon's in prison. Peter Navarro just got out. At what point does the system just one day people wake up and they say there isn't one?
You know what? What concerns me about the Trump attempted assassination of Trump is, like, I think this machine, this deep state, is trying to remove threats to its process, whether it be Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And when Joe Biden refused to step down, then a couple days later he had a stroke. Is this confirmed? He had a mini stroke. Like,
I don't think it's been confirmed.
It's not confirmed, but
it's not confirmed that a mini stroke, but I do think it's fair to say that it is confirmed Joe Biden suffered a medical emergency.
So he refuses to step down. They want him to step down, refuses, and then has a medical emergency. I find assassination attempts can happen with more than bullets. They can happen with poisonings. Like, I don't put it past this system, and I don't even know who it is. That's the biggest problem is, like, it's the shadows. How do you defend against the shadows? Like, it's been around for tens of thousands of years, just really running the show and allowing kings to be in position.
It's not just the shadow does not refer to a single person. The element of surprise is a major component for any kind of conflict. So it could be one guy today, a second guy tomorrow. It could be a woman today. It could be a different woman tomorrow. You just don't know. Now, personally, I hear what you're saying on Joe Biden and how they may have tried to stop him. I just don't think they need to. I think we've all seen Biden's failing for the past few years.
You know, it's a silly concept. I'm not purporting that it happened. It's just, it struck me last night while I was listening, and I thought, wow, I hadn't put that one into place, so I might as well talk about it on the show today.
2021, you have January 6th, and you have people who are still being held. You've got one guy who's been held in solitary on and off without any charges. We're going on 3.5 years. This guy's never been charged with a crime, but they won't let him go. What we are seeing now, especially with the contempt charges against Merrick Garland, Democrats break the law and get away with it. Republicans go to jail for the slightest infraction. The lawsuit you have against New York, Supreme Court absolutely needs to say, New York, you're done. We nullify all of it. It's just gone. Yep. And if they don't, and I suspect they won't do anything, we are inching towards a reality where people on the right are going to say, Washington is illegitimate because they don't actually uphold or enforce the law. They are no different than roving bands of bad guys with guns, because that's all we're seeing. Federal law enforcement raiding Donald Trump but ignoring Joe Biden. They're not acting as if they're agents under the law, bringing accountability and equality into the law. They're quite literally just dudes with guns enforcing mandate from Democratic Party officials.
I have a lot of hope with the Supreme Court right now, only that because they are demanding New York respond. They didn't have to issue that demand, as far as I understand.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have to accept our filing. They could have just dismissed the filing on the pleadings and said, "No, Missouri, we're not going to have this lawsuit." So, I mean, yeah, look, this is moving in a positive direction in the sense that we're going to have a chance to have some of these issues litigated. And again, I think that the Supreme Court, one way they could kind of sidestep the issue is to pause on a ruling until such time as the state court in New York takes action at sentencing. Because if the court sentences President Trump, the court should do the right thing, just dismiss the indictment, vacate the judgment, turn him loose. But if the court doesn't do that, they could, like the trial court could say, well, President Trump, you're on bench probation supervised by the court with no conditions. Well, then he can talk again, and he can be campaigning again, and he can have his appeal play out, and then that kind of lessens the impact.
He's still gagged.
Yeah, he is, and that's the point. Like, the gag order is supposed to protect the defendant's right to a fair trial. The state asked for the gag order, and the trial's over.
Right. It's this funny thing about them delaying sentencing, which is like, on the one hand, if Trump not in prison or doing whatever, getting to be out when a lot of people were really scared about what would happen to him. On the other hand, it just allows this gag order to remain in place, which, like you've pointed out, is actually benefiting the prosecution in a lot of ways.
It allows the gag order to stay in place, and it also heightens the harm under the Purcell claim.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here because you are an officer of the law, and you obviously appreciate law. I think a lot about law and chaos. I play a lot of video games, Baldur's Gate, Dungeons & Dragons. In alignment, you've got law and chaos. You can be lawful or you can be chaotic. And then alongside that, you could be good or you could be evil. So you could be lawful and evil. You could be chaotic and you could be good. That's like Robin Hood. So when law becomes evil, I wonder, how do you protect or defend against a king gone rogue that, well, you don't run into the castle and scream because the guards are going to axe you down. So I'm thinking, like, I'm a bard, man. I got to use my magic for what I'm good at, which is making music and sound and inspiring the populace.
I think
grassroots.
There is no strategic maneuver in a situation like that. When you have tyranny, there's no strategic maneuver. There's only eventual chaos in every direction. Right, so we'll talk about the Founding Fathers and the American Revolution. I love this point. I make it all the time. 1 year and 1 month after the war had already begun is when they signed the Declaration of Independence. So you literally have the Founding Fathers being like, why are you shooting us? Stop, we don't want this, for a year. It's not that there's a lot of people who have this idea in their minds that the Founding Fathers got together and said, this king's kind of a dick. Let's declare independence. And then they did. And then they sent the letter. It sails to England, and then he reads it and goes, "Oh, well, then I'm going to declare war on them, and we'll have a war." And then 3 months later, troops show up. Not how it happened. The regulars were already there. They were suppressing people's rights. They were trying to seize weapons, and regular people just started fighting. It was chaos. And then in response to the fighting, which was started by the Crown, for the most part, I mean, they were the oppressive force. You end up with the Continental Army forming and a war emerging just naturally out of chaos before finally the Founding Fathers are like, we're going to declare independence, I guess. They've been fighting for a year at that point.
And they would have, anecdotally, or at least as a sidestep, they would have had no chance without the French. The French won the war.
I believe the Spanish as well.
The French and the Spanish. It was basically a proxy war between France and Spain against England. And the French and the Spanish used the United States as like Vietnam to wipe out the English, destroy their navy, and then they were like, yeah, and we dig liberty. So like Beaumarchais, so heroes of the French.
Well, yeah, I mean, so if the king had reconciled himself to the law,
done,
then there could have been a reconciliation between the colonists and the crown. But it was, to your point, it was that continual, further movement down the path of chaos and lawlessness that resulted in this exacerbation of the problem.
The crown saying, it's Parliament, don't look at me. The king's like, don't look at me. And then Parliament is like, we control the colonies. And the colonies were like, okay, now you don't. Imagine what would have happened in world history if the Crown and Parliament in Great Britain said, colonists, we hear what you're saying. We'll work it out for you. Why don't we have some representatives from each colony come to Parliament to speak your piece, and then we'll rule then there's representation. Things calm down. The United States remains part of the British Empire. Imagine what the world would have been like if they weren't so obstinate. And what I see now is the deep state. They are doing the exact same things. They are saying, don't know, don't care. It's our power. F you. Nothing else matters. Well, you ask Ian, like, what do you do in those scenarios? There's nothing to do. My fear is that eventually you will end up with people on the right waking up one day and being like, there is no government.
That's deeply concerning. I'm constantly thinking about this right now. Like, how do we preserve against this?
It requires.
That's the biggest problem.
Okay, I will tell you this. It is very, very plain to see. Merrick Garland broke the law. He is not being charged. Steve Bannon was ordered to answer a congressional subpoena, and he said, I can't under executive privilege. And then eventually they said, then we're going to charge you for it. I think that's BS, but fine, if that's what they're doing. Merrick Garland also rejected a congressional subpoena. Okay, fine. Well, he should be charged. They said no. You don't solve this by bending the knee to tyrants who are smashing and burning everything to the ground. We're trying to ask them to stop smashing everything and burning it to the ground. The answer would be Merrick Garland should be in jail for 4 months, in prison for 4 months, the same as Steve Bannon. And then my answer is the system works. There is equality under the law. The problem is you can ask people like Steve Bannon, you've been found in contempt, go to prison. And he says, okay, because Steve Bannon believes in this system. The negotiation, I suppose the terms to be given aren't coming from us. Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro went to prison. They said, okay, we abide by the law. It is the Democrats, Joe Biden, with the Her investigation, not being charged for the classified documents, and Merrick Garland not going to prison despite the fact that he literally broke the law. So the negotiation is, if we want a system to be maintained, you have to participate, but they're not. So we run dangerously close to a point where you're going to get a bunch of people. It's going to be Bundy Ranch times 10,000 in the United States, and that's what I fear.
This is my concern, is that I don't think Biden was running the show and making these decisions. I feel like it was corporatists, potentially international cartels of banking establishments and business dealings and things that would be happy to see the United States dissolve into chaos. So for them, it's almost like a win-win. It's like if we decide we have to fight, we lose and they win. If we don't fight, then we lose due to the fascist oppression and they win through technocracy. So that's where I'm at right now. Like the walls, I feel them. I'm like,
and I don't think that's actually inherent to the American spirit. I think Americans don't like to be on edge like that. They would much rather rebuilding and moving forward in a positive way.
Yeah, man. That's why I was talking about graphene earlier. Did I mention you can do these?
You're talking about graphene every day that I've known you.
On the back window of your car, you got those black lines, those defroster, but they don't put them on the front windows because they block vision. So you make graphene glass ones that melt the ice that are transparent. Stuff like that. Let's create shit and go to Mars, man, and just do something good.
Overly simplistic. There are people who don't care for any of that. They are barbaric and want to watch the world burn. What's the issue? That Donald Trump didn't want any wars? Apparently. You get there's a meme. All of these presidents who started 15 plus wars and killed thousands of people and American troops die in the process. Nothing. Then you get Donald Trump. Someone tries to kill him.
And they didn't at first. No one cared for the first 4 years. It was like,
that's not true. They accused him of being a traitor.
Yeah.
And before Trump before Trump was even the nominee, someone at a rally tried grabbing the gun from a police officer to kill Trump.
They did like a soft coup in the beginning. They were like trying to slander him in the media and push him down that way. And then it slowly escalated to where we're at right now.
Deep State's been against him since day one. He's taken everything they've thrown at him to include a would-be assassin's bullet and is stronger than ever.
Oh, our internet's down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is the show still recording?
The show's still recording, but internet's down. So, yeah.
When did it go down? When they were talking about the deep state?
Oh, no.
Did they mention the
we
king?
did have a time that like the power went out when someone was talking. He was
that's interesting.
The CIA.
YouTube's
the
down.
lights went out.
I think YouTube is down.
Interesting.
Because I still have X on my phone.
I was going to say, I have the internet on my computer.
Oh, maybe are we still live? They're like, if you can't
okay,
take out
just
the
came
show,
back.
take out the entire internet.
It just came back right now.
Hello, everyone. We're back.
How very, very strange. Are people saying that we disappeared?
I just want to say Luke Rutkowski texted me and said, call Hannah on the show. No, Luke. It's Hannah Claire Brimlow. For the record, get it straight.
Yeah, so our stream rate is 0. YouTube has just come back, but we are not. Nothing is being sent out.
So you didn't hear that, world. All right.
No, it's in the audio podcast that'll be on Spotify and iTunes.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to going live again.
OBS reconnection successful, and we still do not have an up rate.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
All right, audience.
Oh, there we go, and we're back.
We're back, audience. When did it cut out? I put it in the comments.
I believe that was YouTube that cut out.
Apparently, YouTube dropped.
Did someone say something that offended the deep state for like the past minute that blacked out?
For the last 3 years?
I don't think we've said anything specifically unusual that hasn't said before, unless they were on a particularly sensitive day.
Yeah, we didn't shut it down. So
that was YouTube that went down.
I do wonder about the infrastructure of large tech companies. I mean, this is something that I've wondered about for a long time. You're pointing at me.
Oh, man, this is my issue. This is really important to me. You're right. I mean, it's not just... Look, the big tech... marketplace behaves differently than any other marketplace because of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which has created this oligarchy of big tech moguls. And so that marketplace is untethered from the normal market impulses that would prevent things like censorship and that would provide things like transparency for consumers to know the quality of and components of the products goods or services they're purchasing, right? Those don't exist in the big tech marketplace because Section 230 of the CDA has been misinterpreted. And that has allowed not only government censorship, which violates the First Amendment, but corporate censorship. That, again, you're shadow banned, deplatformed, de-emphasized, and it's not just your rights as a speaker that are being violated, but your listeners' rights as well. And again, it's more pernicious than at any point in human history because the medium of communication is so much more dynamic and it's done in a clandestine manner. And so as state attorneys general, we need to find tools in our toolbox to help fix that problem. I think that consumer protection law and I think that antitrust law are two options that we're looking at in Missouri.
That's interesting. Do you feel like people realize the importance of the attorney general when they're going to vote? Because from what you're saying, like you have the ability to impact people's lives in so many ways. I mean, in this conversation, we've bounced from, the election to stuff that's going on in Missouri, but also like you've done stuff with Planned Parenthood, with consumer protection. I mean, it seems like maybe this is an office that people don't pay enough attention to.
I think that people in the state of Missouri have started paying a lot more attention based on the work that my predecessors, Josh Hawley and Eric Schmidt, have, they leave behind a legacy of excellence that I'm carrying on and proud to be doing that. And we build off of that and take it in new and different directions. And so I think people are starting to pay attention and see how important it is.
And you said that Josh Hawley was your law professor and then he also has endorsed you for re-election.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Were you guys following that? I'm sure you were, that tech outage a few days ago. It was like
Delta's still screwed.
Yeah.
Delta's down?
CrowdStrike issued an update. And I could be wrong about this, but I heard people saying that it was one of the codes linked to a null identifier or something. Or I forgot what it's called. Is that what it was, Serge? Basically, it was equivalent to a dead link. So imagine you had a code and it was like, after X amount of time, click, AOL.com, but there isn't one. So this update tells all the computers to pull memory from a dead space that has no memory, so everything just crashes.
I'm wondering, do websites like YouTube, do companies like you have the legal authority to just cut access to a user at any moment? Like what happened to us, I don't think that's what happened. I'm not saying that.
I mean, isn't that what Facebook and all kinds of social media platforms do already? They say, you have violated our terms of service. We won't say how. You must leave now.
Well, then you can still log in. You can still go to Facebook.com, but I'm saying, can they issue a denial? So you can't even go to the website, just gives you what is it?
And again, some of this is being done at the government's demand. Some of this is government coerced censorship, as we've proven in Missouri v. Biden. And now that we're back at the trial court level, we can use merits discovery to root out that vast censorship enterprise. We need to build a wall of separation between tech and state to protect our First Amendment right to free speech from government censorship. But separate issue is the corporate censorship. And I still think that there are tools at our disposal now, unless and until Congress takes action to amend or repeal Section 230 of the CDA.
But it should be. I don't think it needs to be it could be amended. I don't think it needs to be repealed, or it could simply be ruled on by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
The issue is not that tech platforms, online web service providers have immunity. The issue is that they also have, Section 230 gives them not just the immunity, but the right to police as they see objectionable.
It's a sword and a shield.
Exactly. And it should be just a shield.
Yep.
You are allowed, the rule should be, you are allowed to only remove through criminal writ of some sort. So if someone posts something that's illegal, you can flag, and a judge can say that's illegal.
Yeah.
I think that's because right now what's happening is, you've got X.com and they're like, we can remove whatever we want and we can't be sued because it's not our speech. So they selectively remove all of the opinions of people who think like there's only two genders. That was actually one of the big things they did. They banned misgendering.
And so, but it's fundamentally reshaping our culture.
Yep.
It by filtering the information flow in what has become the public square. And the remedy for disfavored speech in this country has traditionally been counter speech, not censorship, certainly not government censorship.
So here's a funny component of Section 230 as it works under the law. If I make a news website, or if the New York Times created a space on the front page, a small space, and they said any user can write content and submit it, and it may appear in that box. And so let's just say Timcast did it, right? Any user can write whatever they want. You can't sue me for hosting it. And so then one day on the front page, it says Kamala Harris kicked a dog. Big breaking news. And then you look in there, you see the author, you see this news story. It looks completely legitimate. We're NewsGuard certified as a legitimate news source. And then people are like, wow, look at this report. And they say, we're going to sue you for posting it. No. That was user-generated content. We didn't write it. So there's another problem in this, in that the law would also allow, as per Wikipedia, this is the big problem. Here's your avenue for a lawsuit, probably, if you want to approach this. Let's do this. I'm going to pull up Wikipedia, James O'Keefe, and I actually do hope you use this and launch your suit, because we talked about this a few years ago. All right, James O'Keefe, Wikipedia. James Edward O'Keefe III is an American political activist who founded Project Veritas, a far-right activist group that uses deceptively edited videos and information gathering techniques to attack mainstream media organizations and progressive groups. Both O'Keefe and Project Veritas have produced secretly recorded undercover audio and video, encounters in academic, governmental, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it is my understanding James O'Keefe takes issue with this Wikipedia page in that it falsely characterizes and demeans, defames, and libels. The argument that I was told is that you can't sue Wikipedia. Section 230, right? Well, hold your horses. Where on this page does it say it was written by any users? Does it? No. What's the byline? The byline is from Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So I've talked to lawyers and I've asked them about this. I said, okay, hold on. On Twitter, if Ian Crossland posts, it says Ian Crossland, and then under it says, I just plain don't like graphene. And then you can't sue Twitter or X now because it's under Ian's name. He said this. My argument is Wikipedia may allow users to write whatever they want. That's on the back end. When you view the source, when you look at the source material of how it's written up and it's got users' names next to it in the history, that's what's protected. So if you click view history on this, these individual posts, this is the Twitter of Wikipedia, the username and the thing they wrote. However, they then, as Wikipedia, an entity themselves, write that the article in aggregate is from them specifically. I believe there's a strong case to sue Wikipedia making that argument.
Yeah, they look like a publisher. I mean, 230 was intended to say that these online social media platforms are not publishers under kind of common law defamation libel. They look more like a publisher when they're claiming ownership over the content there. I agree with that. And to your point, I mean, from a consumer protection angle, it's too hard to understand the label. It's too hard to understand how consumers, the information consumers need to qualify whether or not to believe this is not readily available to us.
Let me add a few more components. Wikipedia has super users. So if you sign up for Wikipedia to edit the article, you can't. People make this argument that on Wikipedia, anybody can sign up and write whatever they want. You literally can't. Wikipedia has editorial guidelines. Only certain sources are allowed to be used. And there are super users who have the authority to lock and boot you from a page. Notably, James O'Keefe is locked out. We need to see Wikipedia sued because they are asserting this. Now, in this instance, James O'Keefe himself would have to sue Wikipedia for defamation and say, this isn't a user-generated page. When users generate content akin to what Twitter is, where you can see the user's name and their arguments and the things they've wrote. That's Twitter. I agree. The revision history of the page is protected, each and every one of these posts. But Wikipedia then allows, under editorial guidelines with editorial super users, to aggregate all of that into a post. So I make this argument. And I don't know if you're an expert on this as a lawyer, but so if I worked at the New York Times and I said, I'm going to create a draft article in the New York Times backend, and I will let anyone write anything they want. However, as a super user, I can selectively edit and remove things that don't follow my rules. Then once they write a story about Kamala Harris kicking a dog, I say, okay, publish. And it says, Kamala Harris kicked dogs by the New York Times. That is not protected under Section 230, right?
It shouldn't be. Again, the courts have misinterpreted certain provisions within Section 230 of the CDA, and I think that's caused a lot of the problem. But we're seeing states take action too, right? I mean, Texas and Florida both passed laws that ended up at the Supreme Court in the net choice cases. The Supreme Court kind of punted on that, so it remains to be seen how those laws are going to impact the marketplace. But I think everyone recognizes there's a problem in inaction, and so. Yeah.
Well, here's some defamation. It says Andrew Bailey, politician. You can't stand for that.
Funny. I think at the top where it says from Wikipedia, it should actually say from 7,400 users, and there should be a hyperlink that should take you to them, and it should say super users. It has to.
This article has been edited this many times.
Yeah, and then you'll be able to sue the individual people for defamation, not the website.
This is the problem right now. Is when I asked, okay, on Twitter, on X, if Ian defames me, I can sue Ian, right? Yes, of course. Okay, well, in the history of this, you've got the most ridiculous scenario. How do I sue a guy who wrote one word? So we actually talked about this on the show, and someone built this system where everyone is allowed to submit only one word. You can't sue someone for saying dog. Can you sue a guy who wrote Kamala? No. If I go on Twitter right now and type the word Kamala, you can't sue me. I didn't say anything. What if someone wrote Kamala, the next person wrote Harris, the next person wrote kicks, the next person wrote dog, and then it publishes an article? Who do you sue? That's the problem with Wikipedia. No individual, or I should say there are people who are writing big paragraphs, but some people only add a word. And so someone might write, and here's a question for you. Kamala Harris pets dog. Someone else comes in and changes the word pet to kick. Can you sue someone for writing the word kick?
No, but at that point, you'd have to sue the super user that published the amalgamation, I think.
It's the individual who wrote kick and click publish. Is the argument then, because here's the argument then. Every single user who clicks publish is assigning the entirety of the article to themselves as a user. No. Let's talk about this. Kamala Harris pets a dog. You go in and you change pets to kicks, publish. And you go, I didn't say she kicked a dog. I just wrote the word kick. Someone else wrote Kamala Harris and dog. That wasn't me. So I didn't make the statement. No, what court is going to agree with that? Right.
You'd have to go with the timestamp. You'd see if you actually did put the word kicks in to fill that sentence
In which case, you as adding anything to that article and clicking publish, you're not publishing one word. You're publishing the whole article as a statement from yourself as a user. So here's what we need to do. People on the right complain about Wikipedia all the time. Launch a series of lawsuits against every single user citing the entirety of the page. And they'll say, I didn't write anything about Kamala kicking a dog. I was writing about her time at university. No, you published the full article, did you not? When you clicked edit, did it show you the entirety of the article with everything in it? And you clicked publish. Therefore, you published the entirety of the statement. I think that's what we need to do. Now, my Wikipedia actually isn't bad. Not like James's. So there's not really much in there for me to complain about. It actually says Tim Pool is considered left and right, and there's nothing in there that's like overtly defamatory.
That would be, the thing is though, if it's a big article with a bunch of false narratives and then you go in and change one of the words to actually something righteous, then they could sue you for all the false narratives in the article.
Yep. And we have to change the system. It makes no sense. So what's happening is the left, predominantly leftist liberal activists, go on Wikipedia and put bunk sources and lie, cheat, and steal all through this stuff, like James O'Keefe. It's just lies. And what's the remedy to correct the defamation when they go, oh, I only wrote one word? Don't
I look at it as we're talking about a political or a legal remedy, which it should exist and does exist, and also the technical remedy, which I've always sort of advocated, is opening the software code.
It is open source.
Is all the software code free on this thing?
Yes, Wikipedia is
That's
completely
good.
open source.
Because then someone can spin up a clone of the site,
have.
and then, like Wikipedia, and then people will start using Wikipedia because
not
it's
true.
less.
There's
less.
the Wikipedia system is used for everything. Have you ever gone to like Star Trek Wikipedia?
No.
Wikias, they have 50 billion different versions and they're used for specific things. The problem is Wikipedia is the premier principal online encyclopedia that is used by many people as a directory for sources.
Yeah, Google and we'll put it in search engines and things. It'll have it linked on the side.
Well, we got to go super chats. So smash the like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with all your friends. 1 like equals 1 fight, fight, fight. Become a member at timcast.com. The members only uncensored show be coming up in about 18 or so minutes. You don't want to miss it. We went a little long. I cut into super chat time, but we'll try and read what you got. Clint Torres says, howdy, people. Howdy, Clint. Always with the first super chat. Tim is controlled opposition says, if Kamala turns on Israel, she's got my vote. That is what I refer to as Israel derangement syndrome. The idea that Kamala, who is not qualified, who is, also just deeply uncharismatic, openly corrupt, accused of sleeping her way into politics, the idea that you would support a person because she hates Israel suggests that you have an emotional disturbance internally pertaining to Israel, by which you would be willing to damage your own country if it means that you get to insult another country. She turns on Israel. She's insulting another country. That's anti-America first. That's America last. That you're voting for someone who hates another country but doesn't support your own. America last.
I think Kamala Harris struggles with her national security platform. Again, right now, she's just going to have to parrot whatever the Biden administration did. Deeply unpopular on the Palestine-Israel-Hamas conflict, right? They tried to sit on every side of that issue, and ultimately, it did not help them. There are a lot of people who were saying, I will not vote for Joe Biden over this issue. So she's inheriting that. I actually think this is one of the things that will be interesting when it comes to see who she taps to be her VP, because that person, there's a rumor going around. Could be anybody. A ton of governors are on the short list, but there's a rumor that she might pick someone who has more diplomatic and national security expertise to balance out her shortcomings and their stance on any kind of, not just Israel, but like Ukraine, Taiwan, any sort of geopolitical conflict would be telling.
Max Reddick says, Tim, Destiny is saying some reputation-damaging comments about you. He made a video claiming that you maliciously lied about your no-go zone coverage in Sweden. That's a pretty serious accusation. Destiny is having a mental breakdown. Something pertaining to his wife leaving him. I don't know too much about it because I don't care for, low-tier e-drama streamers. But he's particularly upset because we said on the show last week he would not be welcome on this show ever again. Not because I have any personal beef with him, but because it is against the rules of every platform to glorify or advocate for the death of other individuals. And for that reason, I'm hearing other podcasts saying they don't want to work with him because if he says that on the show, they will get a strike or they will get banned. So I can't say too much about, he can say whatever he wants. You know, one thing I got to say, guys, the biggest mistake anyone can make if they're talking to me and they want to be friends with me is to let me know that strangers on the internet are saying naughty things about me. And it happens all the time. Like, I'll have a friend who'd be like, yo, like, hey, there's a video about you. And I'm like, my guy, this guy's got 100,000 subscribers. The Young Turks make videos about me. Like, Destiny is just some low-tier drama streamer who's complaining and glorifying that people are dead. And what are we doing? We are privileged, and we have the honor of sitting here with an attorney general talking about lawsuits at the federal level to defend election integrity. So, by all means, if low-tier streamers want to complain and get into e-drama, they're allowed to do it. We're gonna try and have serious conversations to the best of our abilities with great people who are, well, I mean, I think you might be the only guy who's actually, Ken Paxton's doing a lot of good stuff, but we appreciate the work you do.
And you've done stuff with Patrick Morrissey, the AG of West Virginia, right?
Yeah,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, Morrissey's good.
Yeah, I was on a panel at the RNC speaking with General Morrissey, hopefully next governor of West Virginia. It's a privilege to be here. I appreciate y'all having me.
Would you ever want to do a roundtable with other attorneys general?
I would be happy to. Yeah, it would be a great opportunity.
I wonder who is your foil, right? If you are the conservative AG, kicking down doors, filing all these bold lawsuits, who is like the Democrat?
Letitia James, yeah.
I assume it's Letitia James, but like, is there someone who we just don't pay attention to who gets even more crazy stuff through?
Okay. I want to do a game show, political trivia, and it's left versus right, where we got to do this. We have to do this. I think it's a moneymaker. It's a banger. But I don't know. I mean, the election's so soon. The idea would be to go out, and ask people like, hey, are you a liberal or conservative? Would you like to come on a game show, political trivia, news and politics trivia show, and win prizes, and we'll have cash prizes and stuff? Because I can tell you this. If you were to debate A.G. Bailey, Letitia James, it would be like watching Mike Tyson box a 5-year-old. She's there's just no question. I've talked with a lot of people. Liberals will not admit this, but I guarantee you, if we did a political game show with run-of-the-mill conservatives and run-of-the-mill liberals, the conservatives would win 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. You ask real simple questions about Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, Volodymyr Zelensky, Vladimir Putin, and they're going to be able to answer at a higher rate than liberals. Just no question.
I don't know what to say. I don't know. I wouldn't do very well on that show. I actually might do better than I think I would.
Let's read some more. We got Summit Forgery. He says, Timcast members, I've been hosting a creators workshop Sundays, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern in the Discord, a space for small business and hobby types in culture building at its finest. Join us this Sunday, the 28th, where we'll be celebrating 1 year of weekly workshops. Go team. Wow, that's really cool. Become a member at timcast.com. There's cool stuff going on. All right. Captain Insano says, Andrew Bailey, you're amazing, man. I live in Springfield, and I'm proud to have you as my AG. MAGA. MAGA. Sorry, everybody.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Let's go. Ethan Sacco says, AG Bailey, I've got my entire family voting for you. I tell them I don't care what else you do as long as you vote for Andrew Bailey. Yeah. Well, it seems like a lot of people are really happy with what you're doing.
I appreciate the support.
I mean, this is basically what happens is we see the breaking news about you filing suit against New York, and we're all like, finally! Like, we've been freaking out, like, and with all due respect, like, West Virginia is deep red. I mean, we could be seeing more state-level actions challenging these what's going on, and it seems like you're definitely doing the most. With all due respect to Ken Paxton and Morrissey, I know that there's action being done, but it seems like you're in the running, charging ahead in front of everybody else.
Proud to be leading the charge. I've got great colleagues, but yeah, at the end of the day, we're gonna do the right things for the people of the state of Missouri, and proud to be leading the charge on some of these issues.
Right on. Barely a Millennial says, I live in Indiana. How do I motivate my AG to act when it comes to returning lawfare? Perhaps if more states moved this way, this madness would stop.
What do we do? Just bombard your letters with postcards? Like, what's the game plan?
Yeah. Look, I'm proud to have, was it 4 or 5 states that signed an amicus brief in support? So, Montana, Alaska, Florida, Iowa, we're all involved in filing an amicus brief in support of our lawsuit against New York. And I think at the end of the day, again, as this case progresses, you're going to see more attention and have other opportunities for other states to get on board. And everybody's got their own jobs to do. And I think the important thing to remember here is each state has different legal authority for their attorney general that's guided by the state constitution and state law. And so again, like the weapons were issued are determined by our General Assembly and the people of our states, and I just have a unique set of I have a unique arsenal to use.
But do people come to you and say, like, hey, you were mentioning before, people are calling your office saying, can I even is Trump going to be on the ballot?
Yeah.
Is it enough to just go to the attorney generals with the things that you are concerned about?
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have the authority to take the exact action that maybe you're taking, but part of it is just being
it's accessing your government. Yeah, the government exists to serve the people and protect the people's rights, and so folks should absolutely have access to the government.
What's the most effective way? Calling the office over and over again, kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, we track our constituent service inquiries, and we actually have folks can sign up for like newsletters, and like we will even target if you're interested in a particular topic like pro-life issues. Then whenever we take pro-life action, we will email you that stuff. We also have a website that we've redone in order to make it more user-friendly, where you can file complaints or reach out, and so we do everything we can to do outreach to the folks and allow them.
For the folks to get in touch with their office.
In other states,
phone calls, is that better than letters?
Phone calls, emails, all of that.
Calls.
I think letters, all of those things are great ways to
coordinated phone call campaigns. Like if you get 50 people to call at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, is that super effective to get your attention?
He doesn't want to say anything because he's got other agents like, why would you sell them this?
I'm trying to build coalitions of like-minded state attorneys general.
But I think your office in particular deserves credit for the fact that you're just so on the ball on X. I mean, whenever you have a press release go out, like it's great to see because right there, and you have so much information. You have all the links anyone needs, like to be informed. I assume Missouri voters, not everyone's on X, but a lot of people rely on it, especially reporters. Like just being able to get the message out quickly is amazing. And
credit to my staff. I don't get to, I'm the quarterback, but I got a team around me, and so my communications director, I owe her an enormous debt of gratitude. She does so much to help me keep the public informed, and I could not do it without her and her entire team. So credit to my staff for putting us in a position to be able to play winning football.
So Jacob Hawley says, Mr. Bailey, what do you think about a peaceful divorce of our country or some type of civil war? Also, will you maybe look into being governor of Missouri? Also, Wisconsin is better than Missouri.
I love that. Will you maybe look into it? Could you just check that out for us?
I was in Wisconsin last week. Beautiful state. Missouri's home for me. I love the Show Me State, and that's where I'm raising my family. And, I'm going to serve in whatever capacity I can in order to inflict the most damage upon the enemy. And the enemies of freedom, safety, and prosperity.
Do you think that one day you might run for governor or something like that?
It would be foolhardy to rule out options, so I don't want to do that. But I'm myopically focused on being the attorney general. That's all I want to do. I mean, I didn't come to this wanting to be a politician. I don't want to be a politician. I want to be the attorney general. I want to do it long term.
I don't know how anyone does it.
It's brutal, man. It's politics is a prison riot with fewer rules, and that's okay. We'll take it. But I am dedicated. I'm raising my 4 small children in my home state, and I get up in the mornings during the school year and I take them to the school bus, and it reminds me why I do this. It's so that they can enjoy the same freedom, safety, and prosperity that I got to enjoy as a kid in Missouri.
How long have you been in office?
About 18 months, 19 months now.
19 months. Were the people of Missouri aware that you would be doing such a good job when they voted for you? But what I mean is, it might sound a little silly, but there's people who are in office where you run in somewhat normal times on a normal position, and then when you come to this extreme and egregious of lawfare actions, I see you as rising up to the challenge and doing what every other state should be doing to challenge the like what we see in New York, what the Biden administration is doing. So I wonder if when you were campaigning, were you saying I'm going to start filing these suits against the government for the BS they're doing?
I was appointed to my office. When Eric Schmidt was elected to the United States Senate. I'm filling out the remainder of the unexpired portion of his term and running for my own term. So I'm running for office right now. But what I would say is that the people of the state of Missouri didn't really know me when I was appointed to this office. And my hope and desire is that over the past 18 months, they've seen the work we're doing and are proud of it. And I think that's reflected in some of the comments you're getting. That's reflected in the comments that I get when I'm out on the trail. And again, it's like, this is the Show Me State. Results matter. Politicians talk. I get to work. So
I think your story is so interesting because you got appointed to take over this term. I keep saying reelected, but really it's just to return to the office you're currently in, elected for the first time. But again, you came in sort of guns blazing, so to speak. I mean, I think a lot of people who were taking over a term that they weren't elected to might be like, I'm going to play it cautious and then I'll get reelected. And you were like, no, people want me to do this and I will act now.
I was just put in the batting order in the World Series. Why would I not swing for the fences? You know what I mean?
I wonder if that's why you're doing so well then.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm unfettered from kind of those normal considerations that might inhibit my
I wonder if
audacity.
A lot of the people who got in, who get elected, their first term is building coalitions, but also making agreements with certain political action committees and things like this.
That's right.
You come in and you're like, I got a job to do.
And I don't owe anyone any favors.
Yeah.
I don't owe anyone anything. I can make my own decisions. I'm not beholden to any special interest groups. I'm not beholden to any entity that might otherwise, again, stymie forward progress on issues that are important to the people.
For the first part of the question, we did talk about it quite a bit already, but I'll give you just a real simple version if you want to give us a quick answer. Do you see a risk of some kind of peaceful divorce or balkanization in the U.S. over what's going on?
I think there's absolutely a risk. I think people are fed up and tired of it. I think that, again, the government exists to protect our rights, and we see government weaponized time and time again against us. And when you have people that feel like they don't have a voice in the process, whether it be because we have unelected bureaucrats passing laws instead of the people's elected representatives, or this shadow government who's running things, and a deep state that we can't trust, those things make people not want to participate and withdraw, and that's enormously problematic. We've got to get back to a place where we elevate the rules of the game above the players and the outcomes. It's a rule of law issue, as you so clearly articulated in your analysis earlier.
Yeah, it freaks me out. Because I think we might see, the Bundy Ranch kind of standoff, but the entire country. Just people being like, you guys don't have authority anymore because you're not legitimate. All right, let's grab some more Super Chats. TRD says, allegedly there are poor unemployed people in Missouri that are donating tens of thousands of dollars to Act Blue. James O'Keefe has showed these as likely illegal donations funneled from billionaires. Will you look into it?
Yeah, look, we're going to use every tool at our disposal to make sure that contributions that are solicited in the state of Missouri are not done so under false pretenses. You've seen that in our work on the Media Matters case and other cases. We're willing to take bold action in that space.
There's a viral tweet going around right now. We didn't get into it because I don't know if it's confirmed or not, that the donations to Kamala, they're arguing, came from one billionaire who broke it up and was illicitly, it was being illicitly sent through hundreds of thousands of individuals. James O'Keefe had an investigation where he went to people's homes and he said, how come you donated 57,000 times $5? And they're like, what? And it's like, yes, over the year. How is that possible? Does it mean you're donating 5 times a day? And these people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So
and it's also, it's legal as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, to give someone every year a gift of like $13,000 untaxed. But if that gift has a purpose down the line, then it becomes illegal. Is that
well? So consideration is the term for something in exchange of value. So if there is money given with no consideration, it's a gift. And there's actually a couple different ways it can be handled. It can be handled as a yearly tax-free gift, which goes up every year. I don't know if you know it's like 13,000.
I don't know the amount, but you're
something like that. Yeah. But then there's also lifetime gift totals, which can be higher in the millions. But if there is consideration, then it's taxable. So yeah.
Well, it goes like, to become a criminal offense. You always look at the mens rea, the mental state, like what was the intent behind it, and sometimes that's difficult to ascertain. But that's that would be the result of a criminal investigation.
Yep. So why would you? What was your question?
Because if a billionaire gave $10,000 to 1,000 people and then they all gave that money to a candidate, if there was consideration ahead of time.
Well, and if there was an intent to evade campaign finance law, okay, then we got a problem.
So if a billionaire gave 100,000 people, $1,000 each or whatever, and then said,
"See you later.
Do whatever you want," but then they all gave it to Kamala. Yeah, he's gonna get arrested, But that being said, well, I'm sorry. If he gave it to Trump,
yeah, that's right.
If he gave it to Kamala, they'd say, "Looks good to me." All right, we'll grab it. All right, we were going a little over. My friends, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel. Share the show with all your friends. Head over to timcast.com right now. Click join us, become a member. The members only show will be starting in a couple of minutes. You don't want to miss it. We're going to have member call-ins, and we're going to talk about some serious issues, but I'm curious as to what you guys have to say and ask. So again, timcast.com. You can follow me on X at Timcast as well as Instagram. AG Bailey, do you want to shout anything out?
Yeah, hey, really appreciate you guys having me on the show. Big fan. Just so proud to be here representing the people of the state of Missouri. We're going to keep fighting the good fight.
And people are going to follow you on Twitter, X, at AG Andrew Bailey.
That's right. Check us out at ago.mo.com on the official side, and you can sign up to get news about the work we're doing. Or if you live in the state of Missouri and have a consumer complaint or other issue, we've provided forms and points of contact there on the website.
Man, that was so informational, dude. That was awesome. Truly epic. Thank you for coming, and thank you for divulging the info. And if the show did cut out, I hear at one point it'll be on Spotify and other websites.
You're gonna hear us going, "Oh, it's out."
Yeah. I don't know what point it came up, but we were having an epic conversation about the deep state. It was really fun.
I believe YouTube drops the dropped portion, and so if you're watching or if you watch the video, it just skips over.
So I guess the main thing, if you want to get it all, check us out on Spotify. I'm Ian Crossland, and I will see you later.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I feel like I have to tell everyone that you didn't actually know your own X handle because you're so focused on what you're doing, I guess. And you're like, we have to ask my staff members really quick. So I think that's really cool. I think it's a testament to how dedicated you are to your job. And I hope you come back soon. I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for scnr.com. That's Scanner News. Follow all of their work at Timcast News on the internet. I'm on Instagram at hannahclaire.b. I'm on X at hannahclaireb. Thanks for all of your support. Have a good night.
We will see you all over at timcast.com in just a few minutes. Thanks for hanging out.